Hey, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to the kitchen. So I want to tell you a little story. 3 years ago, to the day, a young boy came into Zoom headquarters and said, I'm taking over the place. And his name was Andy Carluccio. Say hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Great to see you. David, thanks again for having me in person here in Miami. It's really great to connect with you in person and to see all your smiling faces. Yeah.
So this is kind of a first for me. So I just want to make sure, can everyone hear Andy okay? Is that okay? Yes. Okay, beautiful. God bless America. So yeah, Andy is here and I could not be happier. I got to hug Andy. But wait, so tell that, like, it's actually the 3rd year anniversary, which is
it is December 27th, 2021. My first day at Zoom, and the start of a really exciting journey together, and with all of you as well, right? So it's been awesome from a tech perspective to see what we've been able to do, but really the more rewarding part of it has been the community and places like this where we get to come together and talk about exciting things, what people are working on, what we can do to make it better. And I'm really so blessed and incredibly lucky to be doing what I'm doing with the people I'm doing it with. We got a great team, and couldn't be more excited. So it goes by fast, David. It goes by real fast.
It does go by fast. We were just talking beforehand that think about how much has changed in Zoom in the past 3 years since Andy's been there. And I'm not going to, pretend like it's all him. As he would say, there's a whole team. But I mean, just the whole experience, the whole way of interacting with Zoom, what Zoom can do, the way we use it, it's a completely different beast than it was 3 years ago, and all for the better. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Let's make the rounds real quick so everyone can say hi. Robert, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Good to see you, David. Good to see you, Andy. And thank you. The 3 years that you've brought into the production world into Zoom is what I'm really, really grateful for. Thank you.
If I'd known, I didn't know, I would have brought a cake or something. We could have actually. All I have is I have a happy birthday video, but that doesn't seem appropriate. Mike, how are you, sir?
Doing good, and I'm expecting to be a very busy boy today. So
you're good. You're a good sport, Mike. You're a good sport.
Yeah.
I'll keep all the Andy questions coming from the YouTube audience, and I'll be bugging you guys during the show, guaranteed.
Love it. Love it. Hasmukh, how you doing over there?
Very well, thank you. Good evening from Cape Town. It's just after 10 p.m., so I have to stay awake for this, You
have to stay awake for this. Absolutely. Good to see you. Hey, Tamara, who's watching on YouTube. It's really good to see you here. Tony Mobley. Hello, sir. My inspiration right there.
Greetings to Rabbi David Paskin and my friend Andy Carluccio. I'm glad to be here. Glad to support Zoom Test Kitchen. And I'm looking forward to learning something new about Zoom.
We're always learning something new about Zoom. And a fellow, I don't know, are you a coder? I don't even know this is how little I know about these tools. I don't even know what Justin does to make the magic happen. But he does something to make it so that all of the tools that Andy builds work seamlessly in companion with Stream Deck. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for that intro, David. And you are right. I do make random things work well in companion, but Andy does all the hard work.
No. By the way, if you don't follow Justin on Instagram, go do it. He's got really great content behind the scenes. You think your desk is cool? You got to see what he's got set up there. It is something else. Yeah.
Wait, give us the behind the scenes. Oh, that's just not fair. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wait, and you've got 4 more or 3 more behind you. Wait, tell me quickly, Justin, how many computers are running all those monitors?
3.
Oh, so 3 separate computers with 8 monitors.
Yep. 2 Mac Minis and 1 Windows machine.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Almost 7. That doesn't really count. I kind of have.
Yeah, but count the Stream Decks, David. You're the king of Stream Decks.
I have all the buttons on the screen. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I was going to say, Robert beat me to it. Yeah, exactly.
Frank,
How many are you up to now, David?
Stream Decks? Just four. Just four. Well, actually, wait, funny story about the Stream Deck. So my companion Stream Deck here, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, randomly stopped working. And I freaked out. And so I immediately bought a new one, only to find that I just had to jiggle the plug, and because it had just come out a little bit. But I'm not going to return it. I mean, it's a Stream Deck. So now I have one at home for my little setup at home, which is nice.
David, you've got 2 underneath your desk. You
Oh
forgot
yeah,
to count
I've got the
them.
pedal under the desk. That's true, which I almost never use. That's just a silly thing, if you ask me. Frank,
I never
how you
use
doing,
my pedal
sir?
either.
No. How's it
I'm
going,
good.
Frank?
Good. How are you?
Good. Anything exciting happening in your neck of the woods?
Oh, no, just on holidays. Hey, Andy, thanks for joining us.
Great to see you, Frank. I hope you're enjoying your well-earned holiday break. I find that with our friends in EDU, the holidays can end up being a lot busier than the semester itself, because all of the things that have to change in between the semesters end up getting run through at this time. So hopefully you're getting some time to relax and enjoy yourself during the holidays.
I am.
Good,
Thanks.
Good. Excellent.
Do you get to take like a good chunk of time off now, or not really?
I'm off until the 14th of January. I took
Oh.
some personal vacation time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love
Thanks.
it. And you're still here with us. That, my friends, is how we roll in the kitchen. Let's see. There are a bunch of people here without their cameras on. Hello, Andre. I'm really glad that you're here. Tlalak is here.
Good evening.
Oh, hello, Andre. Nice to hear your voice.
Hello.
And Tlalak is here. So happy to have you here, Tlalak. And then I'm in here like 3 or 4 times. So okay, so that'll do it. So what should we talk about, guys? I don't know. Do you want to talk? I mean, we didn't really dive into all the updates for OSC, for ISO, for tiles, for all that stuff. Do you want to? I don't know. Is there any like highlights that you want to share?
Yeah, we got to the end of the year, and as I think you've seen maybe with many companies, we want to take some time off during the holidays, so we ship everything that we've got, and then we have a couple of weeks to enjoy Christmas and New Year's. So we pushed out updates to pretty much all of our production tools on December 13th, I want to say, maybe last week on Monday or so, and it was across tiles, Zoom Cuts, ZoomISO, ZoomOSC. So they all got updates. OSC and ISO mainly quality of life, bug fixes, improvements, things that have been requested from customers. Lighter on the feature side, and definitely more of a focus on performance improvement. But a couple of nice to haves, like when a meeting ends, now all of the selection columns will go to the none field instead of keeping the participant names left over from the last meeting. So things like that have been requested over time. A couple of things with webinar panelists as well that we improved there. Zoom Cuts got a complete transformation, and we're on V2 now. It's a bit of an understated release, but we've completely rebuilt it, and we've introduced this new idea of a native plugin to Zoom Workplace. So traditionally, right, if I were to ask, hey, what's the number one pain point when using something like Zoom Cuts? It's that, well, it's great that we have all the Apple shortcuts, but it's its own Zoom client, right? So I'm not using Zoom Workplace when I'm using this. And so maybe it's an older version of Zoom, or maybe it's got some peculiarities or differences. I can't run other Zoom apps at the same time as running this, right? Because it's not truly a Zoom Workplace client. It is a meeting client that's built into the app. So what we've done is we've taken Zoom Cuts, we moved it over to this new plugin technology that allows us to actually pair it to Zoom Workplace as an app. And so those Apple shortcuts can run directly inside of your Zoom Workplace client, which gives you access to all the other features that you're using in Zoom while still getting access to those Apple shortcuts. So that was really exciting. It's the first of a journey for us in terms of transforming some of these tools instead of being standalone applications to actually be built on top of Zoom Workplace and acting as kind of direct plugins to the app.
So do you still download?
You do. You download an app. It's much smaller. I think it's gone from 500 something megabytes to maybe 30. So it's dramatically smaller because it doesn't bundle in the client anymore. And instead what it does is it pairs to Zoom Workplace. So you sign into it with the same account that you signed into Workplace with, and then you have a pair button up in your top menu bar, and you'll be able to connect the two to each other. It will activate a green light, and it will say, hey, I'm paired up to Zoom Workplace now, and then you run like a join meeting shortcut, and it will actually send Zoom Workplace into that meeting. It's not a standalone client anymore, which is a direction we're really excited about. Fewer app intents are supported right now than we have in our standalone meeting SDK version, so that older version is still there if you want to use it, if you have something that depends on it. We'll continue to add more of those APIs. But what we've enrolled right now has been based on the feedback that we got from all of you. Thank you, all of you who tested Zoom Cuts over the past year, helped us get some shape and direction for it. So super appreciative of that. Yeah.
Sorry, so you download that from?
You still download it from Liminal. Yep. So it's still a separate download, and we'll continue to look at that process as well over the course of the next year. But for right now, we're really excited. It's the first application that we've released that operates as a native plugin like this. You've been able to do Zoom apps in the past that are web browser based things that show up in the right hand panel, right? But you've never been able as a developer to take native code and actually build a plugin to Zoom and connect it over inter-process communication on Mac and PC.
This is
So
the only thing that does that.
right now, it's the only thing that does that. Yeah.
And the thinking is that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everything my team does, our intention is not only to build applications directly, but to build frameworks that then other companies can leverage. So I'm excited to kind of see what other people come up with in this vein as we make that available to developers this year as well. So that's going to be really exciting. Our big update was to Tiles. It's probably our biggest feature release for Tiles since we started the open beta back in late May after we announced it at NAB. And we've added so much to it. There's been a lot of excitement with Tiles this past fall. A lot of events have been using it, broadcast television, virtual experiences, and even some like installation use cases inside of a studio environment for like regular daily use. So that's been really interesting for us. So we've gone through the feedback. We get a lot of feedback about Tiles, which is super exciting for me. And we've shaped this update to address a lot of that. The big flashy new feature is the arena seating layout mode, which creates these kind of stacking rows of participants that get smaller as you get away from the center row. That creates sort of a forced perspective effect. And you have some different dials and knobs to control how much smaller the row should be, how many tiles per row, things of that nature. So you have some customization and control. This is really designed for LED walls. If you're going to do some sort of arena setup where you have maybe in-person seating that then transitions into virtual seating and continues on, this will help that perspective line up and you can get some more control with that. We also added a lot of animations to the app. So if you have on your left-hand side there, David, you've got a trigger that you can actually, that toggle button, that radio button, it's green. If you flip that to the off state, it creates this animation where the tiles will float in and out. So yeah, it's easier to see with a large grid. Yeah, so you can, if you turn off your engine, for example, and you set up maybe, I don't know, 30 tiles just for the sake of argument, and then you flip that setting, you'll see a pretty dramatic. I would set it to like a scale to fit layout mode or something like that. Yeah, so under gallery, I'd set it to scale to fit, just so you get a good group there, and then you can kind of see what's happening when you flip that setting on the left side. The galleries will transition in and out together. So they have this little animation. I don't know how well that plays over Zoom since we're recompressing it and sending it back, but if this were up on an LED wall, this effect would kind of give you some more individual control. And there's settings for whether you want it to radiate from the top left corner and ripple across all the tiles, or whether you want them to randomly pop in and out, whether you want them to fade or scale and fade. So trying to bring some of those transition moments, those big reveals, hey, we're bringing the audience up on screen, trying to make that special in a way that's more complex than a crossfade, because this effect happens on each tile individually, so they can create these kind of wave effects or different things like that. We also have these new hover animations and things for our overlay emojis as well that create some kind of complexity in that process.
So this is, it's setting for this under animation. This is called the gallery.
That's right. Yep. And so now galleries can be enabled or disabled. Those gallery cards on the left, you have a slider at the top that will turn all of them on or off together if you were to have multiple ones, or you can turn off an individual gallery with that new radio button that exists on the gallery card. So that was a lot of fun. These visual apps are very enjoyable for us to program because there's so much variety in what people can do with them. So we have a lot of fun with that. And then the other big pillar of this release was making it work better with multiple galleries simultaneously. Yeah.
This is so much fun. I had no idea this.
Sorry, David, you're breaking up. We can hardly hear you. Can you just check what's going on?
Yeah, I was muted the whole time. Sorry. I was sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I apologize. This is so cool. Wow. Wow, that in and out. That's really nice. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no problem at all. And the other use case that we've seen is you're going to put hundreds, maybe even thousands of tiles up on screen. You're not going to do that from one output from one computer. So you're going to use multiple computers together to do something like that. So how do we split those galleries up across the computers to avoid duplicates? So there's been a lot of, quality of life enhancements around how to do that. There's also a hidden feature, and this one I think was one that you had requested at some point, David, the ability to put a specific person in a specific spot.
And I haven't been able to find.
So let's turn on the engine again and let's look at it together. So if you turn on the slider and power it up and then go to the outputs tab, and let's set the number of tiles to fewer than the number of people in the meeting, just so that it's obvious what we're doing.
So
here.
we're going to come back
3
over
or 4.
here.
Yeah.
You know what I should do? Hold on. I'm going to, well, no, that didn't work, did it? Let me just change this so that you all can see what I'm doing. Can I do, is that working? I've, for some, oh, wait. Sorry, bear with me a second, guys. Camera C, that's what I want. Okay, so now they can see what I'm doing.
Sweet.
All right, so thank you.
So let's go to the gallery tab and set
Yes.
max participants to like 2 or 3, just for the sake of argument.
All right.
And then we'll go to the outputs tab now.
One of the questions I have, by the way, is why it's never been entirely clear to me why there's an editor tab and an outputs tab, as opposed to, because it seems to me that the view that I understand that the options on the right change, but the view in the middle doesn't. I don't know. It's just.
Yeah, so the editor is a safe place for you to make adjustments and pre-visualize how things are going to look. The outputs tab actually uses the live participant data to show you one for one what your output actually looks like in that moment.
Gotcha.
So there is a bit of a difference there.
Gotcha.
So if you right click on, let's say Frank's tile.
Okay.
So you see that replace with pop up, click that. Now you have this window that pops up and you can search for somebody to replace him with. So somebody else who has video on, maybe Hasmoke or Tony, you can now click on them and you can preview what is going to happen, and then you can hit apply. And what that will do when you hit OK is it will replace Frank and Tony, and it will star Tony in that position. So now Tony won't be rotated by the queue that you're running automatically. So if you need to lock certain people in certain locations and you don't have time to go through the other categories to go fish them out, this is an easy way to say, hey, I want you in this spot. Let's put you there. This is an experimental feature, which is why it's hidden behind a right-click menu, but it is something that we got a couple requests for and looking forward to getting people testing it out.
I like also that, so it's interesting, you don't know what these icons are here until you kind of hover over them.
Yeah, there's some weirdness with how that list is running.
Yeah.
Again, one of the reasons this is a hidden feature. But yeah, they correspond to the categories on the left-hand side of the app.
Okay.
Yeah,
so eligible means I haven't blocked them and they're not in my list of people not to include.
Correct. So they pass all your filters. So you haven't blocked them, and if they have video on and you have told that we're not allowed to have people with video off, then they've passed that requirement. If you don't allow co-hosts, they've passed that requirement. So it's everybody who could theoretically be on screen at some point, even though there are a limited number of seats.
And unassigned, is that?
It means they're not set to any gallery right now. They're not going to any output.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a big update. It's probably, like I said, it's probably the biggest update that we've done to the app. And every time we do a tiles update, we're looking at multiple different customer segments. We got people who are doing big LED walls. We have people who are doing broadcasts. We have people who are doing virtual events, kind of like you're doing here with this 2-up between the tile source and your source. And so we try to sprinkle in some features for each one of those groups. Not every feature is for every user, of course, but I think we've covered a lot of different use cases with tiles at this point, and more to come for sure. But this is a big update for us.
Is tiles integrated with Companion?
Not yet. So one of the things
Justin.
I know it's not Justin's fault. There's no API yet for tiles. So one of the things that we wanted to be careful about was that because we knew we'd be making so many rapid changes to both the interface, the functionality, the workflow, the names of things, we didn't want to create an API. Then the developers who build off of it would have to go re-implement as we keep changing our mind as we approach the end of our open beta period. So I'm waiting to get out of open beta. And then once we do that, we'll go in and say, okay, we've solidified kind of the core tenets of the app. Let's go ahead and formalize, the join flow over an OSC protocol or something like that. And that will then open the door to Companion and other things like that to be able to get remote control of some of our settings.
Forgive my ignorance here. Tiles is, I don't even know how to ask the question. What I'm curious about is you said releasing an API from Tiles. Is it not the same API that Zoom has? Is it a separate API?
That's a good question. So I know there's been some discussions on the show before. What's the difference between an API and an SDK? And
well, that's just because I don't know.
No,
right?
no. But it's a good question. So these terms are a little bit overloaded, to be honest with you. API kind of casually has been used to refer to primarily things that are web-based exchange. That's not what it technically means, but there are a lot of people who will conflate REST API with just API overall, which would be something like, database operations. If, let's adjust a setting on our account via, some REST API call, right? An SDK is an actual download, a package that gets distributed by the developer. Inside of that package, there are functions, and these functions are also often referred to as APIs of the SDK. But these functions, there's a command for spotlighting someone. There's a callback event that fires when somebody joins a meeting, right? There's these different functions that a developer can use and work with. But it's written in native code. And what I mean by that is that it's part of an application package itself. It's loaded by the application, invoked by the application. It's not something that a command gets sent out to go invoke on some other service, some cloud service, right? Where again, that API term gets used a lot. So anyway, so to simplify, so look at ZoomOSC, for example. What ZoomOSC does, it takes our Zoom Meeting SDK and wraps it into an OSC interface. So that, when you send a command to spotlight somebody from Companion, the chain of custody there is we get a UDP packet, an OSC UDP packet from Companion that says spotlight this person, and it gives some identifier. We then process that identifier and we call the Zoom Meeting SDK to go spotlight that person. Wow. So ZoomOSC is basically a translation layer between the Open Sound Control Protocol and the Zoom Meeting SDK. And similarly with Tiles, if we wanted to do something where you could press a button in a third-party app and then be able to, let's say, join a meeting, we would do the same thing. We'd implement something that allows us to receive a data packet from a third-party application that could be UDP, TCP, that could be inter-process communication, all sorts. It could be a web server, sending a command to us. There are all sorts of different things that we could do there. But at the end of the day, we would break that down, process it into a call to the Zoom Meeting SDK, and then we'd implement that action there. So that's the super deep technical details of it. But basically, any developer today could pick up the Zoom Meeting SDK and implement whatever of these functions they wish. But for those who are using kind of no code or low code environments like Companion, having that translation layer in the middle so you don't have to go download an SDK and go register an app in the marketplace and do all of those things, but you can still build some automation into your life and your workflow. That's really the goal of what, Zoom Cuts and ZoomOSC and any automation tools that we add to the platform aim to offer to kind of shield you from all the complexities of being a true developer at the code level.
Would you call Tiles also a translation layer?
Yes and no. I mean, technically what it is it's a translation layer between Zoom's raw data video feeds and SwiftUI and Metal on macOS. So it's a media server. It's a compositing system that takes the individual elements that are used to build Zoom and builds them in a different way and gives you control for how those things should be put together. So the border colors and the aspect ratios and how many tiles and what the behavior should be and rotation, all that's defined at the application layer. And then we expose that to you to say, all right, you have all the dials and knobs. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Tiles uses the Meeting SDK to get the individual video feeds, composes them into a view, and exports them somewhere else. It's very similar to ZoomISO, in that it grabs the video feeds from Zoom and exports them, but it adds that extra step in the middle of being able to compose something out of multiple sources. So it has to do everything ZoomISO does, and it has to be a media server, which makes it a fun challenge to work on.
I never thought, so Tiles is in some ways more robust than ISO.
Well, it's more complex, certainly, because ISO takes an individual feed and puts on an individual output, and it's that simple. It grabs the source. It has to do maybe scaling. It maybe has to do color space conversion. It has to do resampling. So it's not to say that it's a literal one-to-one. There is some magic there, and that we spend a lot of time making sure that performs really well. But it is simpler compared to Tiles, where you have to take that times 50. If you're going to show 50 people on screen, you got to do that 50 times now. And then you have to lay it out in a view, and then you have to get that pixel buffer of that view, and then you send it to NDI or SDI or wherever you're going to put it to. So it is a bigger task. And in fact, there is a lot of shared code between ISO and Tiles with respect to how it interfaces with those third-party output systems. So a little bit of behind the scenes, but yeah, that's trying to reuse as much as we can to be able to ship things quickly and try new things out.
Hasmuk, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to share a passionate Pascan request of last week.
Wait, don't throw me under the bus. Hold on.
Yeah, we were discussing a certain individual's setup with OBS. So one of the requests or thought was to have the speaker view in the center and then the gallery view wrapped
He knows exactly
around.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. So Felipe, right? So Felipe Nardi. So Felipe and I go way back, all the way to 2020. He started his work by building off of ZoomOSC. So similar to how we talked about before, where you want the ability to get, he was using the data of the order of the gallery view to be able to figure out how to crop the gallery view in OBS to set the right tiles in the right places. He's since moved on to using the SDK directly, which has been really exciting because that's part of what we want in this journey.
So he built his own.
He built his own Zoom integration to be able to do this. And I think he also has a mode where he doesn't necessarily require the Zoom integration because he knows that the gallery will be a certain size and a certain position so that he can do some intelligence there as well. But yeah, that started as a ZoomOSC story. You would get Maestro and then you would get ZoomOSC together, and then you would use both those apps to be able to do the effect. It's a very compelling layout because it lets you focus on the presenter, but you see all the interaction around it. Yeah, this is something we definitely want to do with Tiles. There are a couple of steps to that process. First, being able to have the hole punch. So if you're going to punch in content from a different system, like ZoomISO, you're going to grab the participant or some other app or maybe a local camera feed. First, you need to be able to punch the hole. Then you need to be able to replace that if you're going to use Tiles itself and not a third-party tool to put something in the space. That's another step. So these are the kind of things that we're looking at as well for the app. So you saw in this update that we broke up the grid a little bit. It's no longer, it can be triangular now. It doesn't have to just be a fixed grid. So as we start to kind of break that apart,
triangular because of
with the arena seating mode. So now we've started to play with this concept a little bit more. You have the replacement concept. You can see how that might be used for selecting somebody to put into the center, right? These are the individual elements of something that could come together in the future to build something more interactive like that, where you select this person, have a conversation with that person, put them away, and put them back in the grid.
Justin, you have a question, but I didn't have my chat open, so go for it. What's up?
So since we're talking about gallery round, we'll have just not active speaker, but also be able to put spotlighted people in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And again, those identity
unique. That's unique speaker.
Well,
right?
That's a little different. So unique speaker basically says, take somebody who's not one of my other outputs, and then when they become the active speaker, put them in that slot.
Right.
What I think Justin is talking about is, hey, I'm going to spotlight somebody in Zoom so my people in the Zoom meeting see that person front and center, but my audience who's watching the live stream automatically gets a view that is a little bit more nuanced, where that person's maybe large in the center, but you still have this kind of periphery of everybody else. What's nice about that is that A follows B, right? You do an action in Zoom, and then your layout automatically adjusts to react to that. And so you're not having to operate two different programs simultaneously to get the same look and feel. So those are the kind of things that we look at as well. Tiles, I will say, for as much as possible, and it's not always possible, but where we can, we try to do a bit of a set and forget. That's why there's that editor and outputs tab. You set it up, you join the meeting with it, and then unless you're doing moderation tasks, you have that queue timer that's rotating people to get equal airtime. You've got the ability to dynamically resize the grid and have things, autofill and match where they need to go. As much as possible, we try to alleviate you from having to actively operate the application after it's started. Best practice, yeah, definitely have somebody there. Certainly for moderation purposes, that's a good practice. But from a pure tech perspective, it offers advantages over things like screen scraping and cropping, because if the number of people change on screen, you don't have to update your crop. We automatically reflow the tiles and make it work.
Yeah, having someone to keep an eye on, one of the problems that we have here, because everybody here kind of knows what they're doing and they have advanced gear, or most of us at least, that the toggle for hide non-video participants doesn't always work because a lot of us
fade to black.
Right, exactly. Just fade to black. But I can imagine, when people will go off screen or they'll walk away, and you don't want that in your in your tiles. So that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And you don't necessarily want to stop their video either and discourage them when they come back from participating again. It might just be in a certain moment, you're going to block them, and then you can go over to your blocked list in tiles and unblock them at the right time, right? And put them back in rotation. So it keeps you in control.
Yeah. Tony, go for it.
I just wanted to ask Andy if he could talk a little bit more about how the integration of Mimo Live, Ecamm, and some of the other products, vMix, how they are progressing with the integration with Zoom.
That's a great question, Tony. And I'm appreciative of the opportunity to talk about this because as I was talking to David before the show, this has been a kind of a key pillar for the past 3 years for me of, why I wanted to be at Zoom in the first place and what we wanted to do here. So certainly ZoomISO, tiles, ZoomOSC are useful applications in their own right on their own accord. But really, they have a larger purpose. And that larger purpose is to be an example app to the industry established players in the space in video production and to show them what remote contribution with Zoom is capable of. And then to actually be able to support them at a code level to say, here is not only what you can do, but here is actually how to do it mechanically, step by step, what the code needs to be in order to be able to set up this type of connection to Zoom. And so when we put out ZoomISO version 2 at IBC in September on the show floor, and we made that big announcement, hey, we have isolated video, isolated audio, look at all these different things we can do. We have the high bandwidth connection. We have all these things. It was yes to be able to offer a great application to the market, especially for those people who are using like hardware switchers, right, where the only way to get video into it is to get video from Zoom out of the computer and on to some other connection, right? NDI, SDI, whatever you may have. So it's certainly valuable in that way. And I don't mean to take away from that. But what we were actually trying to do, and what you saw then subsequently at NAB in the following spring, was the onboarding of Wirecast and Mimo Live and certain updates that were made to Cinemaker and this whole, I'm going to forget, New Blue Captivate had an update, right? They all announced simultaneously at NAB 2023, these Zoom integrations, pulling out the individual video feeds at high bandwidth, at high quality, being able to work with them as individual sources, right? So these developers worked with us to be able to take what they were inspired by seeing with ZoomISO and actually building that into their applications as well. And one of our big achievements, I think, in 2024 was that we onboarded vMix and Ecamm into that family as well. Two major players on Mac and PC respectively, right? And that was really exciting to see because each of these developers has taken their own spin on it based on the purpose of their application. You look at Mimo Live, which is almost to me like a Photoshop of live video, right? Where it's layers based and it's not a traditional A/B preview program type setup. And then you look at vMix, right, which is a lot more of an input-based switcher, right? And you're thinking about individual components, and then layers are sort of something that's done on the end output system. Even Tricotronics, right, with Isadora, that's a media server. That's designed for creative applications, not even necessarily broadcast production. But they're all using the same core technology, and they've put their own flavor and their own spin on it. And that's not even just to start of what's been done with data-based applications, right? You look at Universe Control and their Zoom integration, and it's, yes, they have video and audio feeds, but really what they're doing is a lot of that ZoomOSC style control, automation frameworks, things of that nature. So again, these apps, while they're there to provide value and you can use them, and again, now they're included in your Zoom Events license, so there's, easy access to all of that stuff, and they're valuable, don't get me wrong. But what's more impactful, I think, is that now the entire broadcast live events industry has standardized around Zoom as that production protocol because we've been able to show them at a code layer how to do that work. And they continue to add updates, right? So, Oliver's done some great work this year with Mimo Live, and, the Ecamm is continuing to work on their integration. Everybody that you mentioned, Tony, is continuing to invest in this because they're hearing from you and they're hearing from other users of the applications what this means to them, how it simplifies the workflow for them. I'm not precious about somebody using ZoomISO versus the built-in vMix integration. Why? Because they're using Zoom at the end of the day. That's the most important part, not what tool, or I don't want to micromanage people's pipelines or anything like that. I just want people to have high quality remote contribution, and I feel that Zoom is the platform to do it. So these apps have really been an investment in our developer tools and those relationships with those developers to make sure that they're using the latest and greatest, and then they can offer that to you directly in the most seamless workflow possible, which is using your favorite apps but having the confidence that the remote contribution component is going to be solid because it's familiar to the guest and it's using our infrastructure rather than Zoom infrastructure. So that's kind of the big picture there, Tony. Hope that helps.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Justin, what do you mean it's smaller? You wrote in that the tiles window is smaller. It doesn't look smaller to me.
You can shrink it more.
Really?
Yeah. Justin had a great request on this. Tiles forces itself to the foreground when it's on because we want all of the Mac OS optimization goodness. And if you minimize it or background it, you risk getting relegated off of the performance cores and a couple other things there. So Tiles is kind of greedy about when the engine is on, forcing itself to be the on-top window. But that can be a mess when you only have one monitor and you need to be able to juggle a couple of things at the same time. So we made the minimum size of the Tiles window smaller so you can shrink it down more than you could before.
It's still not getting pretty. I mean, that's as small as it gets.
It
used to be twice that size.
Oh, was it?
It used to be a lot larger.
Oh,
than
interesting.
That. So we're going to keep looking at the trick with this is how do we make it so that you can still see the useful things you need to see. Right now, we've made it so you can still see everything that you were seeing before, but smaller. In the future, we'll figure out other ways to hide certain things as the window continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. But it is designed to be in the foreground. So that is another consideration for us.
Interesting. Huh. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just spin the ball around a little bit towards corporate events because that's where I sit. And what you have done, Andy, in Zoom has actually helped me so much to bring and take out a lot of these of the functionality that you provided and push it back into the corporate networks. I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, if someone was using Zoom in a corporation, they'd ask me to produce their event on my Zoom license. Today, I can go back to them and produce this event on their license because I have the tools to do it. And the other thing that's happening is that even if they're using Microsoft Teams, I will actually put some of the main speakers into Zoom and then push that into Microsoft Teams so that they're in their safe environment with their thousands of participants all over the world. So I don't know how much people who just sit in Zoom appreciate the fact that in the corporate world, what you've done is allowed us to actually expand into networks and platforms that aren't Zoom, but they know that we're using Zoom for it.
And that's the benefit of industry standard protocols, right? And that's kind of the thesis of ZoomISO is, hey, let's take those Zoom streams and make them compatible with what everybody else is working with, right? So let's get them connected to professional broadcast switchers. Let's get them on the network over NDI. Let's get them into, even the siphon protocol so that other applications on your same computer can get access to those frames. And let's do it in a way that everybody in that meeting knows that their data is available, right, to these third parties and that it's disclosed so that we can keep the circle of trust, we can keep people informed, which again, another advantage over screen scraping, right, is that we have that additional control. I know for me, Robert, this past year, the one I was super excited about shipping was the interpretation update, which I know we've talked about before, but I think about that story you told about the stack of 8 computers per room to be able to egress those different languages, the remote interpreters, and now that you can do that in a simpler setup. And again, it's that story of compatibility. Let's get that compatible with that Dante infrastructure on site or those belt packs or whatever it is that you've deployed there. Let's make that easy and get that set up and not have to worry about one computer for each task, but an app that actually breaks the Zoom call down into the individual pieces so that you can put it back together with production and distribute it wherever you need to go, whether that's Zoom, whether that's another platform, whether that's a broadcast RTMP feed, or whether you're going out to satellite, right? Like all those things are now possible because we've aligned on the industry standards and have worked in that space to make it happen.
And of course, those last minute changes, can we add that additional language channel? And you don't have to have another Mac Mini to do that and another video and audio interface. You just send it up.
And that's a great point too, Robert, that I think all of us who work in production understand that the client will have last minute requests. Like we cannot premeditate everything, right? And so we've tried to build these tools with that in mind, that you can adjust your ZoomISO outputs or you can change the way the tiles is going to behave in a certain situation based on those last minute requests. And in fact, a lot of the story, especially for tiles this year, has been that it has allowed companies to be more nimble to those design related requests that come in at the last minute. When they see it up on screen, they say, you know what, I actually think a 1-by-1 look is going to be better, and I want to change the number of tiles on screen. Trying to do that in a traditional pipeline with a media server is possible, but very intense. It's very complicated to do all those adjustments. Being able to drag a couple of sliders and dials and make that adjustment instantly and create that feedback loop with the director, with the customer, with the talent allows you to quickly iterate through the pipeline and get to the end result you're looking for. So that's also a very important observation about our approach to these tools.
Yeah, and then the other thing, of course, is with the interpretation. If I've got an event which has French, Canadian French, and French, and then some sort of broken French for Creole in some of the other languages, I've suddenly got interpreters from those very places speaking the original languages in their locations, which makes it so, the localization of that is so perfect. In our business, we call it pure translation. It's pure, it's clean. So thank you.
And I think that's the benefit too of being able to use technology like Zoom to do this, where you can get those hyper localized individuals wherever they are in the world, right? You don't have to fly them out to the venue in order to be able to offer that. You can bring that service directly to your attendees by bringing these people into a Zoom meeting, setting them up with the right channel, and getting that personalized touch on it. I think that, you know, in the U.S. at least, I won't speak for our friends north of the border, but I think if I asked customers what, you know, their stack rank of priorities are in event production, they talk about, you know, the audio and the video and, you know, and certain, you know, design elements and controls. When I go to Europe and I ask that question, the number one thing before the video is even considered is, what's my interpretation pipeline? Like, they would rather have no picture, but have a robust interpretation system because it is the fabric of every event that takes place, right? And I think that's a big difference between the US and EMEA, but it's such an important feature, and it's definitely been heavily utilized since we released it.
Yeah, and one of the things we sort of take for granted is that when you're having hybrid, and hybrid seems to be the key at the moment, that the real driver, you've got to take those individual language channels out and provide them in the conference room. And ZoomISO does this so perfectly well. So it's just great.
By the way, for anyone who's watching on YouTube, I know you're there. Good to see you. Come on over. If you want to say hi, if you want to ask a question, feel free, pop it into the chat. Mike is attentively paying attention to that. Good to see you here, and thank you for being here. And of course, here in Zoom, if anyone wants to dive in, jump in. I see Tony is there. Tony, can I pop in with a question before? Is that okay? If real quick, I'm curious.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. I'm curious. We've spent a lot of time talking about AI Companion and calendar and docs and notes and all that. Do you use that stuff? Like, do internally in Zoom, are people using that stuff? Are you using that stuff?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Like, our entire business
Really?
runs off of Zoom Workplace. Like, that is our collaboration suite. So we are, you know, we refer to it sometimes as dog fooding. I like to think it's a little more elegant than that, but it's that's what we do. So, you know, I live in team chat during the day. That's how I communicate with my coworkers. My calendar is a Zoom calendar. My mail is Zoom mail, right? I'm using Zoom Docs for all of my internal project tracking and drafting, which has been so helpful, especially in like the world of business documents. To be able to bring live collaboration to that space, which is a little bit slower moving, maybe than more prosumer consumer applications that do, you know, similar type functionality. But that's been great. The ability to collaborate in a meeting as well. Like, that's one of the things I love most about Zoom Docs, is that I can be having a discussion with my team and we can be referencing a document and I can say, hey, let's actually take a look at that. And rather than just screen sharing a browser window that everybody is kind of static, everybody's immediately brought into the document. We all start co-editing and breaking it up and doing our notes in a live collaborative environment that takes it past just everybody in the meeting plus a browser window to do the work. And the live video component is sitting right there next to it. I can see people's reactions to things that I'm typing in and asking them about it. It creates a very seamless experience. So I definitely appreciate Zoom Docs for that. And then, yeah, AI Companion is woven into the fabric of Zoom Workplace. I think it is the backbone of Zoom Workplace, in a sense that it's all about your data and the way that you interface with that data through the eyes and ears of an assistant, right? Who can help you manage that. I think as we continue to talk about what agency is going to look like with AI systems in the next year and all those very exciting things, that has been super helpful. And again, everybody has a different approach to it. Some people are using it just as a faster way of accessing some, setting or set of steps they could follow manually with clicks and knobs. Other people are using it in a generative way where they're actually working on synthesizing text, summarizing text. I think a lot of people are using meeting summaries as a great way to take that transcript, pull out those action items, get a nice report there that I can share out to people after the meeting. Even in that continuous team chat channel, see it right there, those action items bubbling up to the surface. So a lot of different ways people use it. But we live in these applications, and it's so important that we do, right? Because we running our business on Zoom Workplace proves that it's possible, right? And helps us find things in our own world that we can use to make it easier for everybody else who's doing it. And I think that's true of all of our products too, even our hybrid conference room products, our events products. We use all of our own stuff to run our business so that we can have at least a peek into the customer's perspective on what we need to do here.
Yeah. Frank, do you remember, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, we were talking about AI Companion being able to reach into our past meetings and recordings and, saying to AI Companion, hey, when did Justin say this? And then it could somehow access, but it doesn't access recordings. You brought this, I think you had mentioned that. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I think that was part of the conversation with that gentleman from Australia who is using the new Zoom APIs to download recordings and do things outside of Zoom's cloud.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, cloud storage is such an interesting topic in this world of AI applications, because it's not, if you compared the pricing to a cloud hosting provider where the primary service that they're offering is storage, that's one comparison. But I think now the comparison is a little bit more complicated than that. It's that not only, is my data hosted, but what can I actually do with that data? How can I interrogate that data? How can I process that data? Like the player for a Zoom recording, right? That's up there in the cloud. It has, those different options available to it. That's part of the value proposition of the cloud recording storage. And it feels weird to say that sometimes because it's priced by the gigabyte, right? Which is sort of a storage-based metric. But really what you're paying for is not just the storage, but all the things that you can do with that data inside of the cloud.
We talked about that actually. I think it was last week that the player, the Zoom, we really like the Zoom player. That's one of the things we talked about. That we were griping about the cost of. Ray was talking about the cost of storage versus some other options. But you're right. That player we all agreed was a fantastic tool, and part of what you're paying for is that.
Exactly right. It's not just the hosting fees. It's really all the services that come around that. And I think that, again, AI is going to be another value multiplier on top of that storage. Hey, why do you want to have my storage with Zoom? Well, it's because of these things that I can do with it, whether that's distributing it to other people, whether that's interrogating the data to be able to do other things with it, right? That's the value proposition of the cloud storage, in addition, of course, to hosting, right? So
yeah.
When you compare them, you have to kind of keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Tony, I stepped all over you. I apologize. You want to pop in?
I just wanted to ask Andy, the house of worship that I've been working with has been using Zoom exclusively now for 4 years. It's a small congregation. And as of the end of April 2025, they expect to have a new building. And I was wondering if you had a suggestion for the way in which they should proceed. They want to continue to have worship online, primarily in Zoom. We occasionally do YouTube. But I was just wondering if you had a suggestion in terms of the path. We're using the paid meeting service right now. Should we look at webinar? Should we stick with meetings and maybe bring in some different new features from Zoom? So I just wanted to ask that question, if you had any suggestions.
And Tony, you're not alone in asking that question. I think every business that has looked at what a hybrid presence means in the post-pandemic era has asked a similar question in a corporate context. And our answer to that question has been Zoom Spaces. Zoom Spaces is a pillar of our product portfolio. The one that's most familiar is probably Zoom Rooms. And Zoom Rooms is designed to be Zoom having a presence in a physical space that lets us take care of the complexities of audio and video that's shared among a group of participants. So we sometimes joke that there's Zoom rooms, and then we see customers do Zoom in a room where they take a laptop and they hook it up to the TV and they point a camera at a group and they take a microphone and they just kind of pray that it all works and sounds good. Well, the Zoom Spaces allows you to do a little bit more than that because it's optimized for this type of use case. Features like Intelligent Director, where you have multiple cameras in the space that find the optimal framing of everybody in the room and give them an individual head and shoulders shot so that they show up like the virtual participants do, give a little more meeting equity, equal footing. The ability to have attribution to speakers in the room so that the transcript, can correspond to who said what, even if they're all in the same physical location and not in front of dedicated computer setups. And then a lot of the audio processing that Zoom Rooms is capable of makes it a lot easier to be able to have more tenable audio experience in that space, because if you brought multiple devices into the room together and now they're all playing the Zoom meeting out of their speakers and cross-bleeding into each other's microphones, and it can get very messy, very complicated. But still having the ability, if you're going to bring your computer into the space, to pair it to a Zoom room and be able to get some of that content on there as well. So there are a ton of features in Zoom Rooms specifically to address this problem of how do we make sure that a physical location is ready to be able to participate with that virtual component. So I'd push you in that direction. And on the production side, if you're thinking about, okay, now how do I, take that next step in my broadcast and be able to fuse the in-person video audio experience with the virtual side, that's where the custom AV for Zoom Rooms comes into the story. And that's something that we announced this year as well. And we've actually been in our beta process for, which brings a lot of the ZoomISO features into Zoom Rooms itself. Again, for that next level where I need to be able to take this gallery view and send it over to NDI so my switcher can see it, or I need to be able to get the individual audio feeds on the Dante network so that my mixer that's doing the microphones in my house of worship can also mix the Zoom participants down against that on the same console, right? So those kind of features have been part of our focus as well. So I'd push you in the Zoom Rooms direction, and there are a lot of different solutions for different size spaces. This is where there's not a one-size-fits-all answer for you. It depends on the dimensions of the space, the materials used in the space, how many people are you expecting to be there, and ultimately, what do you want the experience to be? That will determine how many cameras, where they should be located, what microphones to use, how the room should be configured. And we have guidance on all of that on our website. We have certified devices and appliances that can do this work. So there's certainly a wealth of information there, but I think you're going to go down a deep rabbit hole, Tony. I see it in your future of looking at what Zoom Spaces can offer you, because hey, a house of worship is a space, and it's a space that that Zoom can run, and Zoom Spaces is there to try to solve that problem. So that's the direction I'd push you in.
I'm just going to say that I've never used Zoom Rooms, and they are the bane of my existence. I cannot stand because like I've literally never signed up or paid for Zoom Rooms, and yet at least 10 times I've been told that I have a Zoom room and it's preventing me from doing something else. But this
is for your account migration?
Yeah.
Is it saying it's a Zoom room, or does it just say there's a generic error?
There's a Zoom Rooms device.
There's a Zoom Rooms device.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was the portal, which has been in my closet for 3 years. So I took it back out. I put whatever, it doesn't matter. This is why I go to therapy. Hey, Robert, can you hold on for 1 second? Mike, we got a bunch of YouTube comments. You wanna share some of those?
Sure.
Oh, you froze. Yeah. Oh no. All right, I'll share them.
Let's start with.
There he is.
Oh wait, you're back. Yeah, you are freezing up. You're getting some squishing of your bandwidth over there. So I'm gonna let that get worked out, and I'm gonna read a couple of these. So let's see. We've got building on. This is from SRBH. Forgive me for not knowing the full name. Mike, I'm just gonna mute you. Forgive me, but I can't because you're not connected. SRBH, building on Andy's note on the importance of interpretation, is there any plan to expand the function to support interpreters handoff? On longer meetings, more than one interpreter will take turns.
Yes, so this is a feature in ZoomISO as well. So when you're using ZoomISO, you're probably used to the idea of picking a participant by their name and putting them on a certain channel, right? And the problem with doing that in an interpretation context is exactly what you mentioned. They're going to alternate. They have to take breaks. And you don't want to have to be jumping back to ZoomISO to change who's on that channel when they take their, and sometimes they're working the interpreters are working between each, keep me honest, Robert, but like they're handing off and coordinating between each other to determine when these handoff points are going to be. And maybe the ZoomISO operator is not clued in to those signals that are going back and forth to determine that. So it's not something that you want to have to jump to ZoomISO to reassign the interpreter when they do their handoff. So what we did is instead, we made our interpretation system in ZoomISO based on the concept of the language channel. So both interpreters in this example would be, let's say it's French. They're going to be in the French channel. So the primary and the backup interpreter are both going to be there. And in ZoomISO, you're going to say, all right, put the French interpretation channel on output 1, let's say. And now whoever speaks in that channel will be present on output 1. So when they do their handoff, you do not have to touch ZoomISO at all. The next interpreter will basically unmute, essentially, speak into that channel, and that will show up in the ZoomISO output without having to do anything to cover the handoff period. So Zoom has built-in features that support the multiple interpreter situation, the handoff situation, because it is such a common place, and ZoomISO follows that channel concept and makes it work there. I'd love Robert to tell me where I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think the context, you're absolutely right, Andy, but the comment in the news of the question is actually for a more extensive or built out interpreter panel in Zoom itself. Because what interpreters are used to is having a small panel like they have now to change who they're listening to and in what language channel they're speaking into, but to have a button that says, I request for you to change over to me, or I'm ready to change over to you.
To make the signaling between them easier.
Yes.
But not necessarily the mechanic of the speaking, but just to have that communication back and forth without having to call it out
We've
verbally.
actually got a paper. The interpreters have actually put a paper together on this and how to do this and sent it to Zoom. So I can look for that and send it across to you. So if you want to throw it onto a good table, it's very simple. It's just that communication that is required, just to say in stink. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. But as far as ZoomISO is concerned, regardless of the method of the handoff, it will respect the handoff because it's taking place in the channel. Yeah, that's great.
How do you turn on interpretation in ZoomISO?
So it's one of your output types. So if you go to the advanced audio tab in ZoomISO and you look at the different modes that you have for each channel, one of them is interpretation. And then if you select interpretation, the selection column becomes the different languages that are available in the meeting. So they would all pop up on a drop-down menu, just like the participant list would pop down if you picked participant mode, or the outputs numbers would pop up if you picked outputs mode. It's just another mode for the advanced audio system in ZoomISO.
Nice. And by the way, that was Scott Hancock. And apologies, Scott, for not knowing
great question, Scott.
Your handle. Let's see. Does Andy have any ideas on how we could use the AI companion to enhance a Zoom event? This is from John Drinkwater, excuse me. How we could use AI companion to enhance a Zoom event in the future as a support bot. My example is to query the event for a speaker and be told when they speak.
So it's funny that you say this because the event lifecycle, I think, has multiple different entry points where AI can be helpful. It can be helpful during the scheduling and creation of the event. So I need to create content for my event, whether that's bios or imagery, where generative AI can be very helpful there. And that's part of the Zoom Events product. Or being able to, set up an itinerary or something along those lines, right? There's the pre-event component while it's getting set up. And then there's the in-event component, and that has its own phases, right? There's the web experience of the attendees building their directory and kind of their pre-show, if you will, which is separate from the organizer's pre-show experience, where suggestions like what John said, hey, help me build an itinerary based on these principles that I'm interested in, would be very useful and helpful. And then in the event, there's so much data, right? There's chat, there's Q&A, there's reactions, there's all that stuff. So what can AI Companion help me do in that environment? And then post-event, you have all this data and artifacts that come after the event. So, all right, of course, we know things like meeting summary, right? Those are helpful, but what perspective can I get on this event as a whole with AI Companion as well? So these are all really interesting areas. I can't speak to any upcoming features, of course, but that's the spirit of it, right? Is that the event lifecycle is a pretty well-defined thing, both for the producer and the attendees. And at each one of those steps in the lifecycle, there is somewhere where centralizing those interactions and making it easier to do your work could be an area that AI could be very helpful.
So we're not allowed to talk about roadmap. You see, like how I just did that, by the way? I just employed myself with Zoom.
You got the shirt.
I got the shirt.
Stopping him?
We are not allowed to talk about roadmap, but
Mike's got the mug.
But Ronnie says, can you talk about remote camera control and what is on the roadmap? We control Insta360 Live, which, by the way, that's the camera that's on Andy now. I'm curious what you all think about how it looks. But the Insta360, is that what's on him?
The link?
Oh, no, that's the link. Sorry. We control Insta360 Live PTZ. Well, maybe that's what they do control. But what else is coming or is already there for remote camera control?
Yeah, so any UVC class compliant camera that's connected to Zoom, especially the ones that are certified for compatibility with Zoom, which the Insta360 link is Zoom certified. When you open up the request camera control feature, you actually get on Zoom itself a little PTZ controller, up, down, left, right, controls, and that will actually send a command over the Zoom protocol to the far end participant and then communicate with their camera to steer the camera. This is really helpful in a lot of different contexts, especially in accessibility contexts, but in the case of event production, this is handy if you send a kit with this camera attached to it, and now you don't have to frame them. You just tell them roughly where that camera needs to go, and in the case of the Insta360, for example, you could adjust how it's positioned and framed so that they're not having to, install control software or screen share and give you remote control. They can just give direct permission to adjust the webcam, and you can move it all together. This also dovetails very nicely with our new remote settings control app, which we introduced earlier this year as well, which lets you access other settings like which camera is selected or which microphone is selected, what audio profile is chosen, right? So we've tried to make it easier for you to essentially reach through the screen into this other person's environment, but to do so in a way that has granular permitted access to certain settings and features. They're kept in the loop about what you're doing on their computer, and it doesn't have to rely on our screen share system, which is maybe overbuilt for the kind of thing that you're trying to ultimately do, which is adjust the camera or change the zoom setting. Certainly, we're trying to, as much as possible, save you from having to verbally explain to somebody how to go to the caret, hit the up arrow, hit the button, not that button. Don't we've all been there. I've been there, and that's why I built remote settings control, as I was sick of of that experience. So, these the far end camera control, FECC is what we call that feature, and then remote settings control, which is the Zoom app that lets you control those settings.
This is sort of a silly question because this is a less than 1% use case, but so I've got multiple cameras running through multiple video encoders into a computer, then switching in Ecamm. Can Zoom, through using that tool, could it control one of my cameras even though it's not so directly chosen as the webcam?
Let's say you've taken the Insta360 and connected it through Ecamm, and then you've got the Ecamm virtual camera, just for the sake of argument. In Zoom, it's unless Ecamm in their driver builds a tunnel for the PTZ control to go all the way through to the camera.
Gotcha.
That will not work. You would have to select the camera directly in Zoom and then work there. But I think part of the assumption with FECC, and not to say this is every case, but probably the majority of people who are going to need someone to help them over FECC are using the camera directly.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're probably not running, something sophisticated
no,
like OBS or VCam at that point.
And by the way, thank you, Robert. I spend so much time thinking about what's in my background. I did not even think about the fact that Andy is stuck with teddy bears in the back of his. I know. I didn't notice it either. So
they're cool though.
They're kind of cool. That is a really crummy background though. I apologize for that. I do have a green screen I could throw up if you want behind you.
I got my Zoom Christmas sweater on and everything. It's very cozy over here in the corner.
Cozy in Florida. Right. It's very cozy in Florida.
I'm melting here. It's like 80 degrees.
Hasbek, how you doing?
Yeah, Andy, for testing or training purposes, especially ZoomISO and tiles, one needs to join a ready-made meeting. So Oliver has built what we call the talking heads. Has Zoom ever considered providing such a service, or how easy would it be to set up? Because now you have a dependency on somebody who's volunteering to do that. If that goes away, it does reduce your options.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of complexity with that. One of the things that we've done is we've actually created tools that make it easier for developers to create meeting simulations using our Linux meeting SDK. So we actually have a tool, and it's actually the same tool that my team uses internally when we need to test tiles with 300 people. We open up this tool, we spawn 300 participants, they dial into a meeting and they play a color wheel. And that's how we, scale test tiles. That same tool has been made available to developers, and they can build that in both to help them harden their applications, but also if they want to offer that downstream as a service from their end. The reason, not to speak to a policy position, but my impression of the reason that we don't do this directly is because there is a need to moderate those environments. You certainly can automate certain controls, but to make it useful, you kind of need to open the meeting up a little bit. And to do that means that somebody's got to be there and watch it for us to feel absolutely confident, especially when our name is behind it. We would not want something like that to be abused. And I think each company, by making the tool accessible to them, can gauge where they want to fall along that spectrum. I know it's something at Liminal we thought about, hey, can we set up this meeting? But we realized, this is before we joined Zoom, that we just did not want to be the ones responsible if, God forbid, somebody were to abuse that meeting. And we want to make it useful because we could lock it completely down, but then it's not useful for testing ZoomOSC or ZoomISO when you can't get any of the permissions that you need. So you can't have somebody there 24/7 to operate it either and listen for people to request permission and grant it to them. So you can either grant it programmatically, which opens you up to the risk of abuse, or you can, lock it down and limit the amount of things that people can do with it, which makes it less useful. So I think each company has to decide that for themselves, how much they want to offer to help harden that. But what we can do at Zoom, and what we have done, is we've made the tools and the ability to do these simulations possible, and we've handed it off to developers who've expressed interest in that so that they can look at that themselves. Oliver has his own solution. Other companies have other solutions based on that. And it's certainly a great service for people who are, tuned into it. Yeah. But I just don't see it as being something that realistically we could offer 24/7 like that.
Yeah, you're right. With the Oliver's one, you cannot switch on your camera. And I understand the security and all the other issues that go with it. But being a non-developer, I happy to invest in infrastructure, but would be kind of a how to set it up would be very useful.
Yeah. And this is, again, where I think we look to the community, not to, say that there's any obligation on anyone to do this, but, Office Hours was kind of the first group that we had worked with to build a meeting simulator tool back in 2022. I know I talked to Jeff at some points about Zoom Test Kitchen, being able to host a service like that as well. So I think this might be the role of the community.
We should do that.
Yeah, I could set you up with the tool.
I didn't even think about that.
And you can run it on a Mac Studio or something like that. And I think that was, if I think back, that was actually kind of the original premise of Zoom Test Kitchen with Jeff, was that he wanted to get a bunch of sources together so that he could actually test a meeting at scale. And I think being able to offer something during the hours where the meeting is not taking place, but is still, open for people to try things out, could be something I could set you up with. So I think that's the role of the community, because it creates accountability among the members, and that's what helps control the scope and environment a little bit more. So I kind of want to push to the communities and say, hey, we're happy to help you get it set up, but you guys ultimately need to be the ones responsible for it. Yeah.
See, David, I had to bring a heavy heater to persuade you to do this.
Persuade me? We've never brought it up before. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'll give it a go. That's a really
we can set you
makes perfect sense. I don't know why we didn't think about that. Go ahead, Robert.
Do that,
Yeah. Thank you, Lois. I'm just gonna.
You can also set up a shop where we can buy those super duper Zoom winter sweaters. That'll be cool, David.
We do shophappy.zoom, right? Wait, shophappy.zoom.us or something. I have to double check exactly what the URL is, but we do have a public merch store.
You do?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll find the link.
Hold on. Wait a second. I got you. Let's see here.
.zoom.us.
Shophappy.zoom.us. Let's see.
Does that take you anywhere? Yes. Okay, cool.
And it's a holiday sale. Look at this. Ooh, tech and stationery. Wait a second. Let's go.
Get all your Zoom merch. Yeah.
Oh, the stickers. Current. I don't even know what that is. Current Essentials Catch One. I have no idea what that. Wow, you can get headphones, an acrylic.
David's going on a spending spree.
A Gruntle decal. What's a Gruntle?
Gruntle is our mascot for Contact Center.
Oh, okay then. Do you know what a Current is?
I think it's a brand.
Oh, Essentials Catch. Oh, it's a wireless charger. Okay, sorry. It's a branded wireless charger. I got gruntled. Oh my God, this is so much fun. Wow.
It'll fit right in with the teddy bears.
It'll fit.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Wow. You know what I have back here? I have, oh, you can't see him, the whale from
Happy from Zoomtopia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize when I got it that you actually had to put it together.
Yes, it's a little puzzle. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Robert, I jumped in front of you.
No, that was good. That was really interesting. I didn't know about the shop, so that's good. Thank you. Andy, I just wanted to show my appreciation to you for the post Zoomtopia debriefs and breakdowns that you do. Because for us producers, they are a masterclass of what to do and how to do things. I go back to them so many times. Just recently, I was looking, where do you put the captions on a live screen in a hybrid event? And I went back to Zoomtopia. That was a reference point. And I just wanted to share with you that the Zoomtopia breakdowns are a masterclass for us. And the documentation is so brilliant. And I go back to it all the time.
Well, I appreciate that you mentioned that, because that is for us kind of the double dipping of value for Zoomtopia. Like my team is involved not really to help orchestrate any of the content or even necessarily the design of the event, but to try to figure out how to make hybrid production possible and practical. So for example, like we try to use, and it's like we were talking about a couple minutes ago about using our own technology to produce our own events so that we can find things that we need to improve. That whole captioning discussion that we did, starting with the hybrid translated captions through the ZoomOSC outputs, like that taught us a lot about what we needed to develop there. And we added features specifically to ZoomOSC to be able to support that for Zoomtopia. And now any customer can go get that and do the same thing. Tiles, the animation to bring in the gallery in and out, that was added for Zoomtopia this year. So that when Eric came out, we could have a big effect reveal moment. The Zoom Meeting SDK for Unreal Engine, which we released in April, was built for the opening of Zoomtopia 2023. So it is kind of a watering well of, how we recommend doing certain things, and it's also a place to experiment and get things wrong too. So that when we, if we do something, that doesn't have the intended effect, we can tell you, hey, this is not, we didn't get the results from this that we were expecting, or we need to improve in certain areas. So it's designed to be an event where we are vulnerable and forward with what we're doing. And I'm glad the documentation has been inspirational for some of your own ideas. That's exactly what we want. We want to be able to say, look, this is our stab at it using our tools. Some of it will work, some of it won't work. We'll figure out and get it right next time. And hopefully in the meantime, you learn something from the process. And that's definitely a goal.
Definitely. Thank you.
I have two, oh, sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Not to put you on the spot. Whatever happened to double enders? Not this Zoomtopia, but the previous Zoomtopia. There was discussion about that, and then it's been a year and a half, and I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, and Ross Mayfield's remarks from the 2022 Zoomtopia, I actually think he talked about double ender technology. There's a couple of things to this story, and I'm not able to comment on exactly what the timelines are or anything of that nature. But what I can say is that there have been developments specifically on the ability to capture local content and update it to the cloud, and that is Zoom Clips. So Zoom Clips has really been a delivery of a lot of that style of technology. And I think that as I reflect on 2024, I'll put it like this. When I reflect on 2024, I think we've taken a lot of ground in the live production pipeline. I think that the next area that I would like to be more involved in and give more feedback on is how to deal with content where the primary goal is to distribute it as like a podcast or a VOD versus a live event, or how to take a live event and turn it into one of those pieces of content. I think that's going to be the next area to look at now that the live tools have gotten fairly robust, I would say. Recorded media is the next area for improvement. It's one of those things where I think to do it right, it's not the kind of thing that you can just take the SDK and build an app that does it, because it involves the far end. That you want that Zoom participant to be running, Zoom Workplace and be able to capture their high quality media And I think to do that right, it's not the kind of thing that we can hack, which is what my team generally does in prototypes. I think it's the kind of thing that requires buy-in from the entire organization to get, the certain things in place. So I think from a technology perspective, the ingredients are there. It's really a product question and product priority question. Zoom changed a lot since Zoomtopia 2022, both in workforce and prioritization and strategy. And I think that, but I do still think it's a very valuable area.
Yeah, it was an exciting concept they explained. And I come from a news background where that's a valuable thing. So I was hoping that wasn't gone completely. The other thing, if I can monopolize the time just a little bit, and again, I realize you may not be able to discuss this, but screen share layouts is super exciting to me during a live event, but it's disappointing that it doesn't record it to the cloud the way it was during the meeting. And I'm hoping at some point we'll see movement in that direction.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting exercise. I'll put it like this, and maybe be worth doing at some point in the Zoom test kitchen to look at the differences between what the client sees, what the local recording sees, what the live stream sees, and what the cloud recording sees, because they all have their own subtleties and differences. The one exception to that is Production Studio, because I said it when I remember it was actually one of my first weeks at Zoom, and we were talking about Production Studio, and I said, okay, what are going to be our core requirements? I'm like, regardless of where this thing goes, it needs to look exactly the same, because the entire premise of it is that it looks a certain way, and it needs to show that way when it's streamed, cloud recorded, local, wherever it goes. It needs to look like the way that we said it would look, and that is the case for Production Studio. So
sure, my end use case though is that I have about, let's say, more than 30,000 users who aren't ever going to use Zoom cuts. They're not going to, some small percentage will. But for a regular user, when they see a screen layout, they expect the recording to replicate what happened during the meeting. And it's confusing and hard to explain to people that that's not how it works, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that these need to be aligned in order to have your expectations match what your experience of the meeting is. So I fully agree with you. David stepped out. So
did David leave me and not let me know? Okay, all right, that's fine. And Andy's still there, so Andy was answering the question anyway. So just back to the YouTube audience, since I'm taking care of that. And if anybody else has any other questions, of course, we have dedicated Andy right now, so let's use him properly, YouTube audience. And by all means, if there's any specific questions related to your production setup or how you use Zoom or any of that type of scenario, definitely let us know in chat, and I'll relay it as I've done already with the current ones to Andy. And our infamous leader has come back with his snacks. I see that.
Snacks in hand. Yep.
As he sneaks in the room again.
I see Justin's
David,
got his hand in the call.
I hadn't. Yeah. All right, Justin, go ahead.
So since we were talking
Andy,
about,
so I just wanted to get some pretzels. That's all.
Since we were talking about recordings with Frank, one of the other things I would love to see is an actual recording that shows the spotlights. I know gallery view will change over to the multiple spotlights, but a lot of times if my local recording fails, I get to do a multicam recording where I have to look at the active speaker recording. I have to look at the gallery and switch back and forth. And it's a heck of a lot of work to get the recording back when I have to use that. And it'd be great if we just had that as a recording.
Definitely.
And hopefully not replace the active speaker, because sometimes they just want single speaker regardless. And sometimes they're like, I want the multi-speaker view in the recording.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because like I said before, each of those services has its own kind of interpretation of what that file should look like and how many files it should create. And then they have different operating requirements as well. Like local recording can be more, it can occupy more of your disk space because it's kind of on you to maintain that. Whereas in our cloud storage, there's certain partition sizes and what the, cost modeling is for how many different files can be created and all that. So there have been these different pressures historically on why they look different, and they're different. They're literally different services. Like, it's different code bases recreating the individual media streams into a composed view, which is why they've been so different. And which was why it took a lot of work to make sure Production Studio wouldn't run into these problems. But that's my only window into that world, is the experience from Production Studio. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it should be aligned.
You know what I just realized? All the really smart Zoom people, Ray Harwood, Frank, Justin, you have long, luscious hair, and I've got nothing. I just realized I'm watching Justin as Hasmuk and I. We got nothing up here. Yeah. Sorry, that was really random. Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Totally random, but I'm just happy I still have hair. Everyone else in my family is going bald.
Hard to follow that comment. Again, Andy, I know you can't talk specifics sometimes, so I'm just going to throw an idea out there and whatever you want to say about it. Specifically for the meeting tool, there's audio meters in our meeting today in the Zoom Test Kitchen. It'd be great as a host to have an advanced feature somewhere where you could turn on some meters that everyone in your group could see. I mean, sure, you'd have to educate them about what the meters are for and stuff. And I know that you can go into the audio settings and just, check your own levels. There's a sort of a rudimentary level meter in there, but I wish we had something like this in the Zoom meeting client that the host could turn on and say, okay, instead of having to do it the way we're doing it now, which is great, but a company the size of Zoom with the resources Zoom has, I think audio to me is almost the most important thing in a Zoom meeting. If I can hear you, I can have a good meeting with you, even if I can't see you. But if I can't hear you, I don't know what the context of what I'm seeing is, especially if it's just a talking head.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think one of the reasons that we experience this as a group more prominently is that we turn off the automatically adjust my microphone setting in Zoom when we have professional audio setups, because we're going to manage it independently. And it's a double-edged sword when we do something like that, because again, by default, Zoom is automatically making all the meters line up with everybody else and getting everybody to a parity. And when that setting is turned off by some participants, we are basically saying, now you are responsible for managing this audio level. Now, again, I don't disagree with you that having the ability to view that as a host would be helpful, but to sort of to give perspective on where we are, we basically have the stance today where if you let Zoom manage the audio as best as possible, given the variety of different chains and things that exist out there, and I grant you that, but we'll try to level around, usually around negative 18 on the meter.
And for most people, I think it's best just to let Zoom do its job. It does it well, and most people should just leave it alone. If they don't know
but
what
I do
they're
agree
doing.
that it is a little bit silly to have to rely on a virtual participant in every meeting, where you want to be able to get a little bit more insight into how the audio is performing, and for them to be able to view themselves, where they're coming in. I completely agree with you on
as
that.
a meeting host, I just wish there was a way I could turn on meters. I know how to do what we're doing right now, but I wish as a meeting host, or for my end users, I wish they could, if they want to come to Zoom training classes with me, which I offer quite often, then I'd be happy to show the people who are more keen a little more sophisticated way of managing, your meetings.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
It's a great idea. Jeff, by the way, Jeff Kellum, good to see you. How are you, sir?
Oh, hanging in here. It's just been kind of busy and nonstop. I won't say the good or the bad at this point.
All right. Well, it's good to have you here. Maybe you'll play us a tune or something at some point. I love it.
Yeah. No, it's. I'm glad to be here, and I'm sorry that I missed the beginning. I'll go back and rewatch it because it looks like there's some good stuff. And Andy, I did put in the chat about on the recording side. I would love to see a separate spotlight view and gallery view instead of overriding the gallery view with the spotlighted folk, because I do a lot of video editing after our 3-hour Zoom events that we do. Not these guys, my group, and there I sometimes want to be able to pull in the audience periodically for reactions, and all of a sudden the audience is gone. And unless I've done it, because I'm using a local recording for the primary view as a basis, and then pulling in the cloud to layer on top. And so I do sometimes have like an audience if I'm using, now my brain's blanking, the view that allows the speakers, the multi-speaker view. So I do sometimes use that, and that preserves the spotlights there, and I see audience at the bottom. But sometimes sometimes I don't have that. And sometimes
but if you record to the cloud, can't you identify I want the speaker view and I want gallery view simultaneously?
I do all those. The thing is, when the gallery view gets overwritten with the spotlighted folk as the gallery view. So if you spotlight people, the gallery view becomes only the spotlighted people. And
even
then
in the recording?
Yes, in the recording.
Yes.
Yeah, basically
Really?
it's the grid view at that point.
Yes.
So it's whatever
I didn't know that.
multi-group of participants means in that context. If it's a spotlight, it's the spotlights. If it's the gallery, it's the gallery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you really can only get, I think, 2, and then maybe plus the content views at once, and it gets tricky when you try to break it down more than that and say, okay, I need a persistent gallery view, a persistent active speaker view, a multi-spotlight view, a content view, like, and you're going to be editing all this together. That's quite a few recordings to make, quite a bit of storage.
I record all separate audio tracks for everybody because that makes it so much easier to deal with, like me talking over you right now.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I have Robert, I have a sort of a silly question before you go, if that's okay. Just real quick.
Sorry, I just wanted to say to Jeff, to give a response to Jeff. Jeff, this is one of the reasons I use ZoomISO and tiles, just to get that view. I actually record that view separately for this specific purpose that you're referencing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the case of, well, maybe that would fix it. I think it's the case for when I don't know that that's the view I want until post-production.
Yeah.
So if it's something that can be recorded the entire time, that's fine. We produce the local view. Yeah. Sorry, Andy. We produce the locally recorded view as a whatever view we want. So sometimes it's the gallery, sometimes it's the speakers with the gallery, sometimes it's just the speakers. So we try to pre-produce it, and then we do a post-production edit. But I'll take a look at that to see if that would be a feasible option for us. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, I was going to say, I think Robert's right that the premise of ZoomISO and tiles is that if you're going to be doing work where you have an understanding that there's going to be some production involved, whether that be live production or post-production, those tools can help you kind of define your own logic and be in a little bit more control of your own destiny there by setting up a gallery exactly the way you want it with exactly the visual parameters that you need, or taking a individual participant or the active speaker stream and just isolating that to a recording track. But at the same time, I also hear you when you say like Zoom has the ability to do these recordings. Can we just change the logic of it to make it a little more useful to me? I think that's also a very fair point without having to bring in additional computers, additional recorders, and all that other stuff on your end to make it happen.
Or even downloading the individual audio files at once instead of individually.
Yeah, being able to batch download. Yeah,
I only needed it once recently, and I went, oh. Because I got to a bug, and I should stop talking. I got to a bug where in one of the Zoom clients, the audio, every time there was silence, it stopped recording, and so each of the audio files were different links. And so I'm going back to the cloud recording to use that as my basis now, because I'm like, this is too much sliding back and forth work to sync up everybody. And anyways, sorry about that.
No, it's a great discussion.
No, it's great
stuff.
Mike,
now you're not happy that I'm back.
No, we are.
No, of course.
Are you kidding me?
No.
All right. So, Mike, there are some questions from YouTube. But before we do this, can I ask a really stupid question? So we've talked about this before. When Zoom updates, when there's an update, some settings are sticky and some aren't. Like, for example, this is a silly example, the Q&A for my PMI in my personal meeting room meetings, that every time I update, that turns off and I have to go back in and turn it back on. Is there a rhyme or reason to what settings are sticky and what settings aren't when you're updating?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think first it depends on what type of update is being done. There's in-place updates, which you do by opening up the update menu from within Zoom Workplace and then asking for an update. And then there's manually updating, which you download a installer and you either overwrite the previous install or you delete what's there and you install the new one. And then there's clean uninstall, where you can actually have a tool that will let you, clean out all the additional cache and preferences files from the system and then install clean on top of that. So depending on what type of upgrade you're doing, you may have different expectations for what those settings could be. But in your case, where I'm imagining it's simply just updating from within the Zoom client and say, oh, update available. Okay, let's run that. Sometimes settings can revert if that setting is part of a collection of settings whose format has changed. And sometimes we're not the only party in control of that. Preference, at least on Mac OS, preferences are actually saved to a preferences file that can be associated with your Apple keychain. And that can also have some ramifications for what they call like safe meeting storage and things like that. So some of these settings are ephemeral for reasons other than what we control. Some of them could just be, it's not a setting that serializes into that save, and it's something that's, at the runtime of the app. It'd be interesting to know if you quit and relaunch the app, if you see a different behavior than when you do a reinstall. But there are certain methods of saving things in your preferences that are controlled by the operating system that get a little bit upset when you try to change the signature or the binary that is trying to read those settings back. They can go into kind of a safe mode where it doesn't let you load that up because it's not exactly sure that that's the right app to read that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mike now he's got a solid connection.
Solid.
Mike, you want
solid as a rock, we hope, and rocks break things too. So so Rodney was just making a comment related to Jeff's question about recordings and such. Rodney was saying that all this fancy recording functions is easily done inside Mimo Live. And I'll take that and I'll let the Mimo Live people, is Rodney correct for Jeff's sake?
Well, I think it is. I mean, Mimo literally stands for multi in, multi out, right? And that's like the name of the app. And that's what's so like clever about it, is that because it's not a traditional AB, ME based switcher, you need another recording, you just create another layout and then you record that as well, right? So I think that is a good observation. I don't necessarily think that if we're talking about a gallery of 49 people that we need as a source, that's necessarily something that Mimo is optimized for. I'm not saying it's not possible to do, but it may not be optimized for that because it thinks about those individual sources as individual boxes, right? And I could see that being a pain to arrange and route every single audience member into every single box.
Do you know, does Mimo have a gallery view camera that you can pull in to a scene?
I don't believe it does.
I know Ecamm doesn't either yet.
Because it's not part of our SDK. Because again, the gallery view in Zoom is a user interface created by Zoom, right? So all Zoom actually is working with are the individual video feeds and audio streams that then get composed at the application layer to build the gallery view. The gallery view is a UI element. It is not a single video buffer, if you will, that is displayed on screen. So each developer is tasked with the challenge of how do you want to work with those buffers. And what Tiles has done, like ZoomISO doesn't have the ability to output the gallery view. Right. It's just not a feed that exists. We would have to be composing it from the individual pieces. So what we said is, okay, well, rather than adding a gallery view output to ISO, that's why we created Tiles, right? Which was, all right, let's build another system to prove to these third-party companies as well that it is possible to work with a high quantity of sources. And here's how Zoom addresses that at the SDK level. So I hope to see in the future not to get too in the weeds, but Zoom's SDK will report the order of the gallery view from top left to bottom right with the IDs of each person in each location that could then be used with the raw data system to recompose the gallery view as Zoom arranges it, right? So these things do exist in the SDK. Developers haven't leveraged them. And I think it's largely because they haven't seen anything like that before. Why would they necessarily do that? I hope that the existence of Tiles and other discussions like the one we're having now add some nuance to that and maybe inspire some developers to take another look at some of those functions, because I do think the ability to record multiple views, fits within the work that some of these apps are optimized for, and they just need to kind of explore a little more deeply and justify, right? Because we can have ideas all day long, but they have to prioritize their books, right, against what's going to make sense for their products, right? So even if it's possible, it may not be practical.
Is that fundamentally what Felipe did? He took the individual feeds and the individual cameras?
No, Felipe is screen scraping the gallery view and cutting it up into pieces and then recomposing it with OBS. Last time I checked, that may have been updated since then, but I don't believe his SDK integration is actually working with the raw data. I believe it's using metadata to do an intelligent cropping.
Yeah, Justin says he's still scraping.
Yeah.
Interesting. Go ahead, Robert.
I just wanted to say that with Zoom tiles, when the attendees don't know that we're using Zoom tiles, they're calling it the new Zoom gallery.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. And I really think what you've done in the pre-show of your events has been creative, where it's like a wave cam, at the beginning, and people get hung up on like the audio sync side of it. But I'm like, look, if it's not a audio experience, the latency is not something you're going to notice. People seeing themselves and waving and being excited. That is a fabulous use case for it, all within one meeting. It makes perfect sense, I think, to do something like that, because again, the audio sync will not be noticed because it's the pre-show. You're listening to music, or you're listening to, remarks or something of that nature. You're not isolating people out of the meeting and sending them back into that meeting with the intention that you're going to have to align their audio with their video in any way. So I think it's a really smart idea.
Yeah, just to give some numbers to that, we hold this meeting where there's about 1,000 attendees, and most of the attendees were coming after the start. Since we started doing this, they're coming before the start, so they can.
Oh, that's amazing!
It's like bingo. They're waiting for themselves to appear on the screen.
and look, that's exactly the outcome, right? Like what you described there is exactly why we are trying to do these things. It's to drive interaction, which then builds live viewership and participation that then spills into the actual content of the event, right? Once you've got the excitement drummed up, if you can continue that and capitalize on that energy as you get into the meat of the event, that is the entire, I think, opportunity of a pre-show, right? Is to try to drum up that excitement at the beginning to bring it in at that level. So that's awesome.
Sorry, I'm playing with tiles. All right.
As David plays with tiles, we do have another question from YouTube when you're ready, David.
Yeah. Tiles is really not tiles. NDI is it's a little finicky, isn't it?
We should look at your network at some point and see how you've got this set up. And there are tools like NDI Dino that will let you actually get some metrics behind what's going on your network with the NDI streams, and that might be valuable data. Because I'm looking over here, and what's being output on that computer does not match what's like the frame rate that's coming into Ecamm on the receive side. And I know that it looks like NDI is having some sort of interference from my point of view. So I would be interested in doing some diagnostics on this network and seeing kind of what the setup is. But yes, it is.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's a miracle that with one wire, not even directly connected to the other computer, you can send the video from one place to another. Like I'm watching you repatch Ecamm this entire conversation and making these new video layouts without having to unplug or replug any physical cable. I mean, that is miraculous.
It really is.
So that it's like, yeah, okay, maybe there's some things you could do better, but man, like what you can do with it and the flexibility is, it's incredible.
It's stunning. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the next question from YouTube is from CW Hunter. He's asking, what is the best way to get multiple video feeds into a Zoom call using ZoomISO or Zoom Rooms?
Okay. So this is on the ingest side. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was saying, so like a speaker timer, PowerPoint program, and Power Notes without adding a machine for each. So again, he's talking screen scraping, right? Yeah.
Great. So this is for getting content into the Zoom meeting. And the way to do that is using Zoom Room multi-camera mode, which will allow you to get up to 4 camera feeds per Zoom Room client. And with custom AV for Zoom Rooms, those feeds can be NDI, or they can even be hardware IO, like a Blackmagic Decklink capture card. So if we were talking about like, hey, I need 4 HyperDecks to play into a meeting and I don't want to have 4 computers to do that, they could each go into a single Zoom room, and those could all show up as individual camera feeds. Again, this feature was originally created because you might have multiple physical camera feeds in a physical space, right, that you wanted to pump in, but you can reuse that for entirely digital content. So I would absolutely say that would get you to a density of 4 per room. So I think you listed maybe 3 or 4 different things there, Mike, in the comment that the user was wanting to pull into their meeting, and a single Zoom room would be able to do all of that, either via USB webcam capture, a NDI stream, or a professional hardware device like a Blackmagic desktop video product. So Zoom rooms is definitely the way to go on that.
Did you want to, Ronnie is saying, Zoom into Tiles, into Siphon, into Memo Live, into recording. Does Tiles output to Siphon? I don't think so.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
But you could do the same thing with NDI on the same computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So none, I've got none. I'm just looking at the none display NDI and Blackmagic.
Yeah.
Yeah. All righty. But anything else from YouTube that we need to?
Not as of yet.
All right.
Definitely let us know in chat.
Yeah, but I had another one of my stupid questions. What good? Justin's here. Go ahead, Justin. Justin has better.
You can ask your question first.
No. I have to remember what it was. One of those like, why isn't my setting the same? It's one of those. But go ahead, Justin.
Got it.
Oh, wait, I just remembered it. Wait, it's about recording though, actually. Yeah. But this is a quickie. It's maybe not a quickie, but you don't have to answer it right now. It's just a curiosity question. Why is there such a difference between what you're able to record in the cloud versus what you're able to record locally? Why aren't those? I'm not complaining. I'm just curious.
So they're not. So they're entirely different products, basically. One of them is designed to run at the edge on your computer, where there are different requirements, such as like, hey, when the meeting is over, we can actually do the transcode, and we don't have to worry about the live meeting service because we're writing raw data to disk, for example, and then transcoding it into a compressed format. Disk space questions are different. File partition and file size systems are different on your computer. In the cloud, we know exactly the type of instance we're running on with exactly the parameters that we're working with. We don't care that the cloud recording send any live service back to Zoom. It is strictly ingesting content. So there is no concern about the live meeting experience being degraded because of too much work happening on the computer at a given moment. So there are different kind of business requirements, but I'm not saying that I think that they should be dramatically different from each other. I think that what has occurred has been sort of the natural evolution of there are different requirements for different services that has led to disparate, code bases for these different tasks, which has then led to differences in the way that, these services display the different types of views and things that come from that.
Interesting. When you and Andy are talking and looking at each other, if you want to swap your video box. Oh,
because I'm looking at you like
okay,
this.
Well, wait a second. I can do that real quick. Hold on a second. I didn't even think about that. Sorry. Wait, so let's move me over there, and I grab you and put you over here, and then I go right here. So now if I turn and look at you, does it look like I'm actually looking at you? Does it work?
Yeah, that works.
Hey, that kind of works.
Yeah,
okay.
that kind of works.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike. I didn't even think about that.
Good call. Good call.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And
Justin.
your name tags are actually correct as well.
Right, you're right, because I did Andy. Yeah, thank you. Justin,
I wasn't
go
going to
ahead.
pick on that part. Trust me. I was going down that road.
I never have anybody in the office, so I never have a setup like this. So I don't even know what I'm doing. Justin, save me. Go ahead.
I'll save you. So, Andy, a question for Tiles and ISO, possibly OSC. For breakout rooms, when I close them, all the machines pop up the breakout room. Is there a way to stop the machines from not popping up the breakout room dialog where you can set the settings and reopen them? Because most of my machines are just not really manned, and so I have to log back in or go over to them and close that so I can
close those windows out. Yeah. Does that pop up if you've set the hide zoom window setting in Tiles?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I have to check on that. Some of those, so we do something called default UI mode for our SDK applications in Zoom. So you have two choices as a developer. You can run in custom UI mode where you get all the individual ingredients, you get to lay them out however you want, or you have default UI mode where it literally is the exact layout that the Zoom meeting client uses for that task. And then as a developer, you are more hands off. Like you don't get to control exactly the behaviors of different windows and control. You have some, ability to interfere, but we felt that it was more important to offer the familiarity of the Zoom meeting experience and not have to chase the recreation of features as they get developed over the ability to set customized use case behavior. And it may be the case, I'd have to look into it, but I think it's likely the case that pop-up, because it is the behavior that Zoom would do in that exact same situation, is following that, and we may have limited ability to interfere with it. But we have been able to kind of break that apart a little bit, like that setting, hide the Zoom window in tiles offers. So I have to explore a little bit more about how that works, but that's something I can take back.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next week is New Year's. Hasmek, you're not going to want to go to bed yet. Next week is New Year's, and all Robert wants for Christmas is for us to do a 2025 wish list. A 2025. Now, is this specifically for Zoom, or it's just like I want a Tesla? Like what?
No, it's for Zoom. Zoom.
Okay, Zoom. So what do we want? We can go around if you want. We'll go around. We'll all tell Andy what to buy us for New Year's. No, but I'd actually like to hear from you. I mean, what no roadmap stuff, but
Sure.
like what do you want to see in the future? What do you imagine?
Yeah. So, and it's funny that, we're asking this question now because this is the time of year that I work on, what are we going to do for the next year, right? Our fiscal year goes to February, so I have a little bit more time than the calendar allows, but I am setting up, okay, what are our engineering teams that I, am in charge of can work on, and then whatever we want to do that is not something that we directly control, but is areas that we can collaborate with other teams. I mean, there's thousands of, employees at Zoom, and, we have to be strategic about what we want to work on, and it's more critical than just what do I wish for. It's that additional strategic layer of what do I want to prioritize is really the question. Because like I said before, there's an infinite amount of work we can do. It's a question of what do we think the next year needs to focus on. So with all that being said, some top of mind things for me, I think there are a lot of continuing in the current direction for the live space. So we got to get tiles out of open beta and into general availability. We got to launch custom AV for Zoom rooms and get that available into the appliances by default and get that going. We have a number of things that we talked about with the plugin architecture that I think we can continue to dip into, both on the Zoom Cuts side. We talked about other types of plugins that might be interesting for us in the future. We have other third-party broadcast or broadcast adjacent companies that are looking at our SDKs right now. They want to get those things launched as well. So that's all going to be really exciting. But I think that we've gotten to a point of maturity on live production at this point, especially when you are able to deploy additional applications. And we talked about today that there are some areas of improvement, but when you're working in a true production pipeline where you've got ZoomISO, Tiles, ZoomOSC, or third-party tools engaged, you pretty much have the best unified communications broadcast tools at your disposal that exist. So I think then the next area of focus should be on recorded content. And we talked a lot today about the different types of recordings that take place and the different business needs that are required there. But I do think that improving the experience of production when we know that the artifact that we're primarily interested in is VOD, podcast, something along those lines, where we're going to have maybe a live conversation, but there is going to be this expectation of editing and distribution after the fact. Trying to make Zoom more flexible for that type of work is, I think, an area of interest to me. I don't get to unilaterally decide what things we focus on and prioritize, but given the ability to, I think that is an interesting area. And again, I think that it's a very challenging area because the way to do it right is not to build a customized Zoom application like we've been able to do for live to solve gallery and to solve ZoomISO use cases and all that stuff. It's to actually modify how recording works in Zoom itself, which involves cloud services and client updates, and has implications to cloud storage and implications to events and all of that other stuff as well. So it's a much larger project, but that is kind of what I see on the horizon as the next area to kind of spend some additional focus. And by the way, that could also be just on explaining things better, right? Documenting better, labeling. It doesn't all have to be new features. It could just be better user education, workflows, tutorials, things of that nature, which is also an area that we look at.
Should we go around the room? Robert, do you have something on your wish list for Zoom?
I've got a long wish list, but I'll stick to two. The most important ones, because Sandy mentioned priorities. So one would be for the interpreters to have that management tool to be able to hand over, see each other, and control the handover. And that's the number one. And the second one would be, from a production point of view, to have a tool like Production Studio that is available as a user that logs in. Just like we have ZoomISO, we log in and we can use it to have Production Studio. In other words, to be able to stream out to the outside something that is produced in Production Studio via RTMP. And then that would be, for me, that would be a dream, because
like
it's something
in a meeting context, is that versus in a webinar? Or
correct, in a meeting context. In
and
other words,
just out of curiosity, and not to say that, you have to defend your ideas in front of me today, but why not look at Ecamm Live or Mimo Live, or a tool that is a client that joins the meeting and produces a view that you then stream out to RTMP or SRT or whatever you like? Like what does Production Studio offer you that those other tools don't have today?
I am a Mimo Live user, and I'm using Mimo Live to do exactly this process at the moment. So you've hit the nail on the head on that one. What would Production Studio do for me? Production Studio, one, is in the cloud. So that's I know we're pulling down, and I know we're doing everything locally and sending instructions back, but it's basically, for me, it's in the cloud, because it's not using all of the resource power of a local computer. With all due respect to Mimo Live is a great tool, but you can overload the computer you're using very quickly. Yeah, when you start NTMP streaming, when you start recording, when you do all sorts of things. That is one. Secondly, with using Mimo Live, if you're not full screening the person that you're pulling in from Zoom, he drops down to 360, and when you switch to him, you take a while for him to get back up. Yeah, so there's issues
they're
there.
doing some automatic resolution management on their side to,
Correct. So in Production Studio, you have a clean cut, and you can preview the cuts and then put them on screen. So that is what I'm missing. So that's on my wish list.
Yeah, I think those are good discussions. And the only thing I would offer to you is, I think that the point that you made about cloud is well taken, because that is a unique, opportunity that we have. Although if you still follow Office Hours, they're doing some interesting things on Monday nights in the cloud with VizVector and Zoom Rooms. That's a bigger build than you're probably looking for, but is interesting that is something that can take place in the cloud. The other thing I'd offer for consideration is that feedback about behavior like resolution management or some of these finer details of the production pipeline, while we can certainly process that and work on that, one of the benefits of having all these companies involved is that you can work with them as well and say, hey, these are things about the Zoom integration that we'd like to see improve, or that you can kind of propose to all of them together and see who runs it at first, right? And because they're, not to say that they're necessarily in direct competition with each other, but there is that kind of desire, at least from some of these companies, to really see who can crack the ultimate use case for Zoom first and really make that happen. So I do think circulating this feedback not only to Zoom, but to those companies that have adopted our SDKs and APIs would be worth your time, because you may find that either Mimo Live or another product can actually meet a lot of these requirements and tick a lot of these boxes for you without having to wait for Zoom to make a change on our side. So just a thought.
Anyone else have any wish lists? Yeah, Lois. Hi, Lois.
Hi.
Nice to see you, Lois.
Nice to see you, Andy. So I was listening to the talk earlier, and I understand it is not feasible to open a test room and have it there all the time. But what about maybe opening a test room at a specific time? Maybe it's only a couple hours a week. Maybe it's 2 hours before the test kitchen. I don't know.
Well, yeah, we're going to work on that.
Having something, I think Zoom could do it too.
Yeah, they don't. That's small. Come on, that's small.
Zoom has a continuous test meeting that you can join at any time. I'll put the link in the chat.
We have it now. It is primarily for testing your setup against the test meeting. It's not the same thing like Mimo Live has with like multiple fake participants having a simulated
there's
conversation.
No one else. There's no one
right.
else in
it's
there.
kind of help me confirm that my connection is stable, that my audio and video sound good, that kind of thing, which tries to address that use case. But yeah. That's a good point, Frank. That's worth.
But Lois, we are gonna try and figure out how we could provide that as a service, because that makes perfect sense for us. Absolutely, and I'm happy to. I have a Mac around here somewhere I can throw it on. Yeah. Awesome. Hey, Tony, go for it.
So this is a wish list, right? Just want to make sure.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
So as a wish list, there's two things. The first thing is that the pro user iCloud account could be increased at least from 5 gigs to 10 gigs.
For cloud recording storage?
Yeah, you mean storage, right?
Yeah.
For
yes.
pro accounts. Yeah.
So that's a wish list. That's one item. The next item is more of a promotion from Zoom to encourage non-purchasers of Zoom to get a basic account. I think everyone in the world should have at least one basic account. I think that it's good to have, from the standpoint of this is the way that the world is going to work from now on. You may not have to be a broadcaster or video production person, but for interaction with family, friends, whomever, you should at least have a basic account. And I just think that it's really kind of on, because we can encourage people.
Yeah.
And I do. But I still have members of the congregation that don't have a basic account. They're just logging in through
Tony, what's
a web browser.
What's interesting is that I actually that's a fascinating thought, and I don't disagree with you at all. I actually think that if I were Zoom, it's a perk that you don't need a basic account to join any meeting anytime. Right? You don't, right?
Right. You can put it in the ID, and as long as it doesnle require registration, you can join. And that's part of the value proposition. You click a link, and now you're in a meeting, right? But I think Tony makes a good point, which is that there is a whole world. I mean, even beyond meetings, if you look at Zoom Workplace as a whole, like there is so much more than meetings that becomes available to you once you sign in with an account and it shows up, and it makes things, calendar events can show up, and it just makes it a lot easier to participate in this environment when you sign in to Zoom Workplace with a Zoom account, even if you're not paying for it, right? If it's just a basic account. I think Tony has a good point there. And I think that there is work to be done to try to encourage people to make a Zoom account and sign up and sign into the client and get some of those additional experiences made available to them. And I think it's about trying to explain the value proposition as to why somebody would do that, right? And what advantages it offers to them. And that's on us to, continue to make that story strong. And it's something that is discussed, yeah.
And it would make my life easier as a person who works.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now, there are some things that you can do, not that it necessarily makes sense for you, Tony, but you can set it up so that only participants who have signed into the Zoom client are able to join your meetings, and so it will force them to sign in. You can also disable the ability to join from the browser so that they just won't join the meeting unless they download a client and join via a client, and that can be done in your web portal settings as well. So there are some controls on your end that you could use to try to force the issue. Not necessarily sure that's the best thing to do in your use case, but it just is something to be aware of.
Right. I know that Tony and I we're cut from the same cloth, and all we want is as many people as humanly possible to show up to the things that we're doing on Zoom. So the last thing we're going to do is put up a barrier.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Well, and I'm dealing with an older congregation, as well, and so, but I think that if it was made more palatable to them, then they would consider it. Even if it's just, you want to do this so that you can interact better with your grandkids and great grandkids and your family members.
The piece, Tony, that I think you have me thinking about now is what is the benefit? There's a term for that. What's the benefit of having to those people? Why do they? If I can join any meeting anywhere, anytime, why do I need an account? And so being able to having a marketing campaign, sort of explaining what's the, the benefit analysis of actually having an account. I think it's really interesting.
Well, one of the things, David, for us, it makes a difference in terms of if we're doing something like a Bible study, or if we are breaking off into small groups to do lessons and instruction. It makes a difference in terms of the way in which we're able to manage the discussion or the study or the interaction. We do games and quizzes, Bible bowls, right, and those kinds of things. And I'm still fighting the battle of getting more of them to turn the cameras on. And I understand that some of them will never turn the cameras on. But I am making some progress from the standpoint that, some people are getting shock microphones, and some people are on camera all the time. And so, we're making little steps.
Yeah.
Tony, you can write a script and I'll produce your video.
Oh, there we go. You have a new marketing team. We're gonna do this.
Love it.
Guys, it's 5:00 and I'm gonna come to you, Frank. But I want to just respect your time, and I don't know what he's here with family, it's vacation. So I want to go home too. So, so Frank, did you want to hop on in though?
Yeah. Sorry. I can ask this some other time.
No, ask it. Absolutely.
All right. So this is more of an edu question. I have a feature request in. I've had it in for a year or two. It's never been completely actioned. I know in the education community, it's a big desire. So focus mode and all screens mode, we use it for proctoring and exams. And it would be fantastic if there was a way to make every person in the meeting anonymous to all the other users except the hosts and co-hosts. There's legal requirements for that, and there's policies many higher education places have, and there's no way to do that right now.
So basically anonymize the participant list. Or
to the participants, like the hosts need
the host and co-host should still be able to see it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And it's a matter of privacy and respect for people who are taking an exam together at the same time, but don't necessarily want to share their identities with the rest of the group.
I see.
I also know there's groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and other support groups that would truly like to anonymize the participants and give them some some privacy, but still know who they are in case they're Zoom bombing or causing trouble, right?
And can I ask, is the reason, well, maybe I'll just ask you to state, why not a webinar in this use case? Is it the proctoring?
It's because of the proctoring and being able to see the people's screens, and also to give them instruction, or for them to put their hands up and say, I'm having a problem with question 3, I don't understand it, or whatever the situation is. There has to be bi-directional communication during an online exam.
Okay, got it.
So there's no way right now you can not allow people to chat. You can turn off their cameras, you can do all that, but the names will still show up.
Yeah, they open participants, like we see here, participants 16. Sure. I can click on that with any role and I can see who's here, what their Zoom name is, all of that. Even with focus mode on, where it would only show me the host and co-host as video tiles.
You get the names
I can still see
in the blank.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's not the case in webinar, but to Frank's point, that's a one-way experience, and that might not meet the needs of a proctoring kind of use case.
Yeah. Robert has on his wish list double-ended local recording, and really the only thing that I want is one of these. What's his name again? Gruntle. I just need oh wait, it didn't work. Hold on. Wait, they can't see it.
He's disgruntled.
No, hold on. Crud. That didn't work.
There it is.
I just need my Gruntle.
We've been trying to lobby the Zoom store to create a plushie version of that instead of a sticker.
This is just a sticker. What the heck?
It looks a lot like the Sesame Street. Yup. Nope.
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah.
Good old Gruntle.
That's funny.
Do we have time for that question from Justin?
Justin had a question? Oh my goodness, Justin. I didn't see you there.
It's all good. I do have one more question. So I have noticed in my setup, I have 2 ZoomISOs going on separate computers. And if I request all videos to turn on from one of the Zoom ISOs, it turns on the video on my other Zoom ISO every single time. I mean, I have to go turn it off. Is there a way to not have that happen? It doesn't do it for tiles.
How are you?
I'm running.
So what's the request to turn it on? How is that?
It's whatever the ZoomOSC request is that says request all videos on.
I see. So there's a setting. So one of the things that we added to ZoomISO and ZoomOSC is the ability to auto accept incoming requests as part of embedded workflows, so that you didn't have to run over to each computer and enable it. I have to double check whether or not we exposed a user level setting to control whether you want us to auto accept or manually accept, but that's probably part of the custom code in ISO that we can change.
Got it. And I assume potentially tiles might do the same thing for me once you implement all of the OSC stuff.
Yeah, and tiles wouldn't have that automatic turn on the camera behavior because it doesn't inherit that piece from ISO OSC's code base. Yeah, it seems feasible that could be what's going on.
Perfect.
Doc
yeah, that'd
Rock
be great
is
if we could fix that.
Yeah.
Doc Rock is watching. Hey, Doc.
Hey, Doc.
Andy, it's the sweater for me. I'm not sure what that means.
The sweater.
Sweater. It's the sweater for me. Yeah. It is
shophappy.zoom.us.
Shophappy.zoom.us. Exactly.
I make no commission on this.
You know what I'd actually love at some point? Yeah. I would love if you, it's not for you to do really, but I'd love to learn about how the setup that you did for the Twit studios. Doc Rock just made me think about it because they're using Ecamm Live, they're using Zoom, that whole integration. I will watch the live stream sometimes on YouTube, and I see them teaching their guests that when they, because what Leo does is he screen shares all the time throughout the entire meeting. And then now that you can toggle between screen share and gallery view, he tells all of his guests, get out of the screen share. You don't need to just toggle back to the gallery view. Yeah. I'd love to just learn more. Again, not for right now, and it's not really for you to do.
I'm happy to if you've got a moment for it, because it is something that we worked on. Yeah.
I just want to be respectful of your time.
No, I'm happy to do it.
Do you all know? So sorry, just for context for everyone. So Leo Laporte, the Twit network, they transitioned out of their studio. They're now in his attic and work. Everyone is doing their own thing remotely. They started using ISO in the studio, I believe, right? And now they're basically using the Ecamm for Zoom integration and to run everything. But they're doing it, interestingly, they're doing it in the cloud, as I understand it. Yeah.
They are. Yeah. So the Twit network is really, really interesting because of all the history, right? Like going all the way back, even before most consumer video conferencing applications were commonplace and had the infrastructure to support that. So you can go back and see, from the early 2000s, Leo with stacks of
the
like TVs.
Skyposaurus, wasn't it called or something?
So that's Colleen Henry's contribution, right, to broadcast, which was one of her many contributions, which was, give me an individual computer for each caller and mix minus the returns to all of them, and do that in a way that you get the individual, streams to the production system, but you have one-on-one calls to get that isolated audio. So Skyposaurus, just for context on that. So Skyposaurus and then Skype TX were one-on-one calls to the studio, and the studio will be responsible for mix minusing each participant back to each other. And the advantage of that was that you had individual returns, you had individual audio, and you had individual video of each guest. I looked at that in 2020, 2021, and I said, what I actually want to do with ZoomISO is try to get into multi-party calls where the guests are actually directly seeing and hearing each other via the cloud, and still be able to provide the individual video and audio feeds to the studio. And that change cuts the latency of the conversation in half. So Twit had traditionally struggled with remote guests speaking over each other, where they would try, especially because it's some of the show's formats have kind of a jump-in conversation debate style setup, and that's hard to do when your latency is over 400, 500 milliseconds, because the subtle human interactions that kind of cue when we would speak in person become more challenging to pick up on and coordinate. So you'd end up with a lot of like everybody talks at the same time and then waits, and then everybody talks again and then waits. And that came from the fact that they had these one-on-one calls. So the pandemic hits, and they start exploring other options for doing remote caller. Skype was kind of falling out of popularity at that point, and they looked at custom WebRTC solutions. They looked at using the Skypeosaurus format with the Zoom client, and that's how they ran most of 2020 and 2021. When ZoomISO version 2 came on the scene, they actually switched from using the Skypeosaurus system with Zoom to using ZoomISO to give the individual video and audio streams to their physical production infrastructure. So now, instead of having individual meeting schedules for each of the different talents, each of the different shows, they had just one meeting for each show. Everybody would join that meeting, and it solved their latency challenges while still giving them the individual video and audio controls. What's been fascinating is now to watch this latest transition from the physical infrastructure of the studio entirely to the cloud and the fully remote distributed setup, where they, like you said, David, have moved to using Ecamm Live's Zoom integration, running in the cloud on a Max Stadium solution that lets them kind of remotely switch. And then what Leo does is he does the share from second camera feature, so that his ATEM showing the different content shares goes up as an additional camera feed from his workplace client in addition to his main camera, so that you can do that 2-up look between the content and Leo at the same time, even though both sources are coming from the same computer. You could do that without a screen share by running a Zoom Room instead of a Zoom meeting client, which is one of the suggestions I've had for them. But for other reasons, it makes sense to run the Zoom desktop client at his desk instead of running a Zoom Room at the desk. But it's really fascinating because, again, they have the advantage of all the participants in the same call. Now that Zoom Workplace lets you easily tab between the different content views, people who want to see the screen share at certain points can look at that. They can kind of individually choose what they want, or they can be in the classic meeting view. And Ecamm has access to all the individual sources, which lets them do all the layout controls and things like that. And it runs in the cloud, so it's not based on anybody's individual setup at home to be able to reliably produce this. It is fascinating. And what I love about this, and I'll kind of end it here, is that the fact that they've been able to stay on the Zoom platform through each of these iterations of their business, to me, is very meaningful, because that shows that we've been able to diversify and we don't have to force everybody to fit our way of doing production. We've become flexible enough to allow businesses to evolve and find different needs and different mediums. And the tool set that we have available to us is diverse enough that it can accommodate all these different workflows while sticking with our platform and not having to switch to somebody else.
When you say they're doing it in the cloud, does that mean that there's that Ecamm is sitting somewhere on and no one's computer and someone's just it's like a VPN type of thing?
Yeah, so there's a data center running a Mac. I think it's a Mac Studio, maybe a souped up Mac Mini, and Ecamm is running on that, and then they have remote control of that instance.
Okay.
And they do it that way so that they don't have to rely on the bandwidth or compute power of any of the technical directors. So they just log into the Ecamm system, and they're basically remote controlling a computer.
That they know has good
internet, reliable power,
okay.
right? It's in a data center, so it's going to have good uptime. And they don't have to worry about any of that being at their home studios.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a very interesting setup. And again, I think it speaks to the flexibility.
Very cool. Tlalak was saying that that the audio is sounding different when you're in this scene versus when you're in this scene. And that's interesting. I don't know why that would be changing. Nothing is changed. I don't know, Tlalak. I did name this. I named this scene the Andy Cam.
Oh,
This is the Andy Cam right here. So, no, it's not just you, Tlalak. Mike, I am officially passing but wait, let's just.
Justin has another question, by the way.
Justin has another question. Justin.
I'm just wondering, any suggestions for running the Mac in the cloud? Like, where do you actually host one of those?
They're running Mac Stadium, which is a service that is kind of similar conceptually to like AWS. I don't know exactly the mechanics of how it's done, but I think it has a better pricing model versus the 24-hour reservation model that AWS uses for Mac instances. It's an interesting approach. I think we're seeing cloud production. I mean, it's no surprise, right? Cloud production has a lot of unique advantages for folks. And I think this idea of running client software in the cloud is maybe an interesting transient moment in this migration. I'm not sure how long lasting that's going to be before just cloud native services kind of take over from client side. But it is a very interesting middle ground to. And you look at what like VizRT is doing with TriCaster and Vector, right? They've taken basically the same code that's running the TriCaster and they've virtualized it and made it an instance in AWS. Like that's a very clever way to double dip on a lot of this effort and allow people to easily approach a familiar interface with a completely different backend, right? And running in a data center and not on their desk. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting approach, and I wonder, what it will look like when we see more of this adoption, and whether or not we're going to have to reimagine the tools in the cloud from the ground up, or whether we'll be able to get by with just running essentially a client in the cloud and getting remote access to it.
I wonder if this could be going back to the idea of a test Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if is there any value to doing it.
The thing I always wonder about with these cloud models is whether or not the economics make sense of it. Where granted, you're not making money off of this, but if you're going to be using this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it might make sense to own the hardware.
Yeah.
Right. So
David, there also Doc Rock was actually mentioning too, they use Splashtop. You might want to show Splash.
Right. So that's how they're remoting into the computer that's running in the Mac state.
Splashtop is what they use to remote in.
Yeah, it's like a remote desktop tool. It's similar to TeamViewer or Parsec or Teradici or that kind of stuff.
Is there one that's better than another? Do you know?
I use Parsec personally. I used TeamViewer in the past. You can even use RDP.
Isn't there a Chrome one? Google Chrome Desktop? Google Desk? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know how far it extends, like whether or not because I imagine for their use case, they care a lot about the audiovisual fidelity.
Yeah.
And so that's what had me go to Parsec during the pandemic for Liminal. We would do like remote editing, and like I needed to be able to see, some reasonable amount of frame rate fidelity and things like that when I was, working on a timeline. So,
gotcha. All right, Andy. Wow! Thank you
this is so much fun.
This is
I'm really glad we got through this. It's a great way, like I said, on the 3-year anniversary of joining Zoom from the Liminal team, to be able to spend it with this community, answer the questions, and I love it. Is a hidden joy. But I love the kind of questions that get answered every year, what people are asking, because, in 2020, it was a lot of like, is this possible? Mm-hmm. And now it's what's the best way to do this out of all my available options. And I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to come back and see how the conversation evolves over the years, and to be able to do it with all of you is really special. So.
And we've many of us have said it before, and Robert is showing it right now. But I'm just going to embarrass you for a moment, because it's, we started 2 hours ago when this meeting started. I was talking about how amazing it is to see how Zoom has changed over the past 4-5 years since you joined, or 3 years since you joined. I can't imagine half of that change without you.
Oh.
I really can't. I mean, your accessibility to us, your friendship to us, your openness to our thoughts and our ideas and our feedback, it just, my daughter has a boyfriend, so I can't send her to you, and you're married.
And I'm married.
And you're married.
But
But if neither of those two things were true, if reality as we know it didn't
if your daughter
exist,
sees this, you're in so much trouble.
Oh my goodness.
they're the same age. That's what. No, really.
Adopt him.
I mean, genuinely, you're just. It's a real blessing to have you in the community. So
I'm happy to do it. I still feel a part of the community. Yeah. Even though I'm working at Zoom now, versus talking about it from the outside. You always made me feel very welcome, and I appreciate that. And that's why I enjoy coming back and seeing what everyone's doing with it. And it never feels like work to do this stuff. So I'm always happy to be here and do it with you all. So thank you all and for the great feedback and a great year together, and congratulations.
Absolutely. So folks, we don't have to go anywhere. I'm passing the baton to Mike. I'm going to cut out and Mike, go crazy.
Sir. Yes. And Andy, as usual. Yeah, and Andy, as usual, yeah, keep me in check in on YouTube when you do watch us too. By the way,
I'll do my best. I try, man. It's hard to keep up sometimes.
That is the funniest, though.
They've started scheduling meetings on my Friday afternoons, and I'm like, okay, I can't.
The fact that we know at any given moment, I can't wait. All right, so now I'm going to say something. When was this? We were in. Oh, it was after hours, extra hours. I was on extra hours a couple weeks ago, and I didn't even think that Andy would be listening, and I wrote something in the chat about tiles, and it wasn't nice. And then all of a sudden, I get a DM from Andy, and I feel terrible. He's everywhere.
No, not to feel terrible at all. Not to feel terrible. Just giving context.
Oh my God! All right, guys.
Happy New Year, everybody!
See you later.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Keep a
great one.
Going.
Bye, David. Bye, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, and back to us. So, if there's any other questions or concerns that we can do before we disappear for this week, let us know in chat. And of course, any of our panelists, if you have any further questions, we can talk about that now. Jeff, if you have any more thoughts, by all means, let us know.
Good night, everybody.
Hopefully, everybody doesn't disappear just because David and Andy left, but we'll be fine.
Just a great way to end the year. Thank you very much. I, like Hasmuk, I'm about to leave, so.
Yes, of course, our people that are way overdue for that. Of course, Hasmuk, thank you as usual for the meters. David and I definitely appreciate that. And Fred is asking, what is this Zoom store name? I actually put that link in the YouTube chat as well. So that is the shophappy.zoom.us link that I put in chat for everybody in YouTube. Okay. Interesting comment that Scott just made an interesting comment in chat, YouTube chat related to fully functional integration of interpretation. Unfortunately, Robert just left, so he couldn't actually give you his thoughts on that. So I don't have any because I don't use use Teams very often. But again, if there is, that's great. Robert would be definitely our go-to person when it comes to the interpretation functionality within the different platforms because he uses all three very, very regularly. Okay, my panelists have gone all quiet on me too. Is that good or bad? Hello, Frank. Are you still sticking around with your Canadian?
Not for much longer, unfortunately.
Right.
It's that season of the year where you got to go visit people.
That's right. 'Tis a season to be jolly. That is true.
We just, besides seeing everyone here, Andy showing up and giving us that much time is interesting. So I wanted to make sure I heard what he had to say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was a busy boy. And thank you, YouTube, as usual. You did an awesome job of giving me all kinds of comments and questions. Hello out there, Doc Rock. We see you out there. And if you want to join us on the Zoom Test Kitchen, Doc Rock, right now, you know how to get in touch with us through our Zoom link.
So the next one of these is on the 3rd, is that right?
I believe so. David has, so we're definitely scheduled in the new year as far as I know.
We're not conflicting with New Year's Eve or anything. That's good.
We are officially correct. That is right. Yeah, we're on going to be January 3rd. Lois, any thoughts of Andy joining us this week?
Oh, he's fantastic as always. But I want to talk about the Zoom Test Kitchen, and I think we had a really good year this year. I mean, we did a lot of stuff on the Test Kitchen, and that was great. So my question is, are there plans for changes in the new year that you know of, that any of you know of about this event?
Well, all I know is that it sounds interesting that Andy and David are talking about potential of the test environment. So that might be a possibility. David hasn't shared any of his thoughts with me to the what is going to coming soon to 2025 at the Zoom Test Kitchen. I know that I've asked Josh as well from the Zoom Events group to join us, very similar like Andy has. So I'm hoping to have Josh join us more often, equivalent to like Andy does, especially when there's new functionalities in the Zoom Events world. Because again, for our target audience, the Zoom Events world would be beneficial as well for the specifically the production people. So that would definitely help us out. I know John, myself, and Ray are always in those meetings as well every week that Josh has, but I'm trying to, again, it sounds similar to Andy where he also has meetings on Friday as well. I'm hoping that Josh is not in those meetings as well. And if he is, then that'll definitely trigger that Josh can't come to us on Fridays either. But I know Josh is definitely in. Of course, you're invited to the Zoom Test Kitchen anytime.
You mentioned that Robert had left by the time that comment went into the chat. Guess what? Robert's following the YouTube. He answered in there.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So just for the YouTube audience, so we got it on video. Robert's answer was, it works as long as you have an external interpretation system connected to Teams. Robert being very, very specific as usual with the external interpretation system. Yes, very important for Scott.
But I got to go, so bye.
Bye, Lois. Have a good holiday.
Yeah.
All right. And Scott is asking, up till now, it was unusual being only one way and recording only gets the original though. Oh, that is Robert and Scott having conversations about the interpretation stuff. Okay. So, all right. So Jeff, are you still with us? You look like you're still there. Any highlights coming up in the new year for all your different meetings that you do weekly? Or weekly, monthly?
I mean, if you care about topics, we're looking at the Cinderella score, the Walt Disney film on January 11th. But that's the most exciting thing coming up right now.
Right, and you and I were chatting quickly about NAMM. So just in case the production world does not know, the NAMM show will be coming up within a few weeks. And that would be, again, for everyone that is familiar with NEB, this would be NAMM, this would be the musicians equivalent to NEB. So just to give a little history on NAMM, that is the National Association of Music Manufacturers. Did I do that right, Jeff?
It's either manufacturers or merchants. It's changed, but that's about right.
It's about right. Yeah. So basically, there is a lot of music manufacturers there, so that's a hint too, just like NEB. So there will be a lot of brand-related, production-related, specific. So audio companies will be they'll have displays. There has been limited on the video side, but again, where that would be more at the NEB show. And when it comes to lighting will be at the NAMM show as well. So if you are a production company, you may also want to look at possibly either attending NAMM virtually or in person, especially if you're in California. Right. As Jeff was talking about, not going to be able to quote unquote drive down to Anaheim to visit, right?
Yep. And it is a drive for me. I mean, 6 hours, but it's a drive.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. For us, it'd be, we would be doing the red eye from over here. So that would definitely, so we're doing the equivalent, but I'm just flying a heck of a lot further. That's all.
Yeah, and it tends to be a nonstop event. And in the past, they took over the entire Anaheim Convention Center. So you have about 100,000 people showing up as an industry-only thing. And so it's kind of crazy to have that many people in one spot where it's not open to the public, but still fairly involved.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Looking for additional questions from YouTube before we let everybody go. Tony Mobley, anything new and exciting at your end coming up this week on Tony Mobley's conversation? Oh, are you taking off Tony Mobley this week because of New Year's? That would be a good question. Oh, if Tony's there. He might not be there. He might have walked away at this point. All right.
I'm here.
Oh, Tony. Yes, no, I just wanted to let everybody know if you are actually having a Tony Mobley this week because it's Wednesday. Conversation.
I'm working on something. Stay tuned.
All right. You hear it here first on the Zoom Test Kitchen that Tony will be having one. So if you're available, that is Tony again, let everybody know when that's usually happening. Time-wise?
That is 8 p.m.
Yes.
8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is on New Year's Day, Wednesday, January 1st.
Definitely heard it here first that Tony's actually going to have one that day. So he's not taking the first off. So. All right. And I think I might have had internet issues once again. But I think I'm back anyways. So any other further questions from the YouTube chat before we let everybody go for this week? And of course, we'll do an early Happy New Year to everyone and season's greetings. And we'll wrap this up momentarily. Once again, if there's any questions, Jeff, anything else? Anything further? No? Good. Tony's being quiet. Roland, anything that's going to be happening in 2025 that we should know about coming from Jamaica? I don't know if Roland's standing by or not, but Roland joining us from Jamaica as well on the call. Oh, he's wishing everyone a happy new year to everyone from Roland in Jamaica. Okay, cool. All right. So on that note, let me just see here. I'm going to be like David. I'm going to look at the actual, make sure I get the right. There we go. All right. Don't forget. Thanks everyone for joining us this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to let YouTube know and also Zoom know how much you like our content. And we will be here in the new year on the 3rd, January 3rd. And we're also here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So see everyone next week in 2025